The darkness clung to the walls like a curse, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. I moved cautiously through the abandoned corridors of an ancient space hulk drifting in the void of the warp. My name is Captain Varian Kor, and my squad and I were on a mission sanctioned directly by the Inquisition. The derelict was a massive carcass, a graveyard of forgotten ships fused together by the warp's malevolent touch. It was said that once a ship entered the warp, it would never remain the same. The currents of unreality twisted and warped the very fabric of existence, leaving behind a nightmarish amalgamation of metal and flesh. The very walls seemed to whisper tales of despair, their distorted shapes forming grotesque parodies of forgotten symbols. In the warp, time lost all meaning. Hours, perhaps days, could have passed since we had entered the hulk, but none of us could say for sure. The corridors stretched endlessly, replicating themselves into a labyrinth defying logic. At every corner, a shadow seemed to flicker, yet nothing was there. Only the constant sound of our breathing and the pounding of our hearts filled the void. It felt as though the ship itself was watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Our objective was clear: investigate the hulk, eliminate any heretical presence, and retrieve valuable artifacts useful to the Imperium. But the warp allows no simplicity. Its malevolence twists purpose into torment, and no mission is ever truly what it seems. As we delved deeper, it became evident we were not alone. The dim lights created unsettling shadows on the walls, playing tricks on my mind. I could swear I heard whispers, ghostly echoes of long-lost souls trapped in the warp. My bolter was gripped tightly in my hands, and my senses were on high alert. The warp was infamous for driving men insane, and I could not afford to succumb to its insidious influence. I remembered the legends told among veterans, that the warp not only distorts the body, but devours the soul.
"Captain, do you hear that?"
asked Sergeant Dane, his voice barely more than a scratch. His eyes darted nervously down the corridor, where the flickering light illuminated the path ahead. "Keep moving," I commanded firmly, though I felt my own resolve faltering. "The whispers are tricks of the warp. Focus on the mission."
"And what if we don't make it back, sir?"
Private Karen muttered, his voice trembling. I turned to them, my voice sharper than intended. "We are servants of the Emperor. His light guides us even here. Hold fast to that faith, or the warp will consume you." As we ventured closer to the heart of the hulk, the air grew colder, and the oppressive darkness seemed to close in around us. We stumbled upon a chamber, its entrance adorned with strange glyphs and symbols pulsing with otherworldly energy. My squad exchanged uneasy glances, but duty compelled us forward. The Inquisition's command was clear. No artifact, no matter how cursed, could be left in enemy hands.
"This feels wrong, sir,"
muttered Private Karen as he traced a finger over one of the glowing glyphs.
"Like we're walking into something we weren't meant to see."
"We are guided by the Emperor's light," I repeated, this time with firm conviction. "Form a line and stay vigilant." The chamber was a vast cavern, a cathedral of madness. The walls were lined with grotesque statues and twisted parodies of the Emperor's angels. The air was heavy with an unnatural silence that sent chills down my spine. At the far end of the chamber, an altar stood, and upon it rested a book bound in human flesh and written in blood. Its aura was palpable, a sickly glow that seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. This was no ordinary artifact. It was a tome of forbidden knowledge.
"That book, it's alive,"
whispered Karen, his face pale under the harsh glow of his helmet's lamp.
"I can feel it, staring back at me."
"Silence!" I growled, though I too felt the unsettling presence emanating from the tome. "Hold your ground! Nothing leaves this chamber unpurged!" As I approached the altar, the glyphs on the floor began to glow, and the statues seemed to stir. I ordered my squad to form a defensive perimeter, but it was too late. The statues came to life, their eyes blazing with malevolence. The warp had birthed demons into our reality. The demons were an abomination, grotesque fusions of flesh, stone, and metal. Their spiked limbs extended like corrupted talons, their eyeless faces emanating a void of infinite darkness. As they moved closer, reality itself seemed to writhe around them, a distorted roar merging with the whispers of the warp.
They are everywhere!
Shouted Sergeant Dane as his bolter roared to life. Hold the line! I bellowed, my voice cutting through the chaos. The ensuing battle was a maelstrom of chaos and terror. The demons moved with unnatural speed, their forms twisting and contorting in defiance of physics. My squad fought valiantly, but many fell under the onslaught. I could feel the warp gnawing at my sanity, threatening to drag me into its abyss. The screams of my comrades became indistinguishable from the warp's whispers, a cacophony that ate away at my resolve. Every step I took was a battle against myself. The warp doesn't just attack the body. It seeps into the mind, insidious and relentless. The whispers grew louder, promising power, salvation, and truth. But every promise carried the sharp sting of deceit. As their leader, I could not afford to falter. My men needed strength, even as doubt clawed at the edges of my soul. Each command I gave was an act of defiance against the chaos, though despair crept into my heart. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, I raised my bolter and unleashed holy fire upon the demons. Their screams echoed through the chamber, but their otherworldly resilience seemed impenetrable. Then, a voice, ancient and malevolent, pierced my mind like a nail.
Captain Core, you cannot escape the inevitability of the warp. Embrace the darkness, and all shall be revealed.
Its tone was not commanding but insidious, like the caress of a blade just before it strikes. "Get out of my head!" I roared, my voice hoarse with desperation. "You will gain nothing from me!" My cry was lost in the harrowing chorus of the warp. Every fiber of my being was under siege. Body, soul, mind, each a battlefield. Around me, my comrades lay fallen, their faces frozen in a mixture of horror and resignation. I was the last one standing, the only survivor, yet I felt my own will crumbling under the weight of chaos. The demons continued to surround me, their grotesque forms pulsing as if alive, corrupted and twisted by the warp's own will. Each time I struck them down, they seemed to regenerate, laughing with dissonant voices that scraped at my soul. The voice in my head grew stronger, more insistent, whispering promises of power, salvation, and a truth my heart could not bear to accept.
Captain Core,
the voice hissed, now clearer, almost familiar.
Your sacrifice will save no one. Join us, and you will be freed from torment. Resist, and the warp will consume all that you are.
Slowly, my gaze shifted to the altar. That cursed book, bound in human flesh and written in blood, seemed to call out to me. Its light pulsed in rhythm with my heart, a haunting invitation that promised both answers and destruction. It was clear that this was the source of the evil on this ship, the root of the corruption that had turned the Hulk into a death trap. I had to destroy it. But how? With the last reserves of my strength, I forced my way toward the altar. Every step was a titanic effort. Every movement brought me closer to the abyss that would consume me. The demons tried to stop me, but with one final surge of faith, I raised my bolter and fired a single shot at the book. The bullet detonated in a burst of sacred light, and a deafening scream reverberated throughout the Hulk, a sound not of this world. The book twisted and folded in on itself before exploding in a wave of energy that hurled me to the ground. The demons screamed in agony as they were pulled back into the warp, their forms dissolving into black smoke that tainted the air with the stench of death and ash. The entire hulk began to tremble, rocked by explosions rippling through every direction. Struggling to my feet, I realized the warp had begun to reclaim what was its own. The hulk was collapsing in on itself, dragged back into the darkness from which it had emerged. There was no escape. My mission was complete, but the price was my life. I closed my eyes and recited my final prayer to the Emperor, invoking his light to guide me through the void. O immortal Emperor, eternal protector of humanity, guide me through this darkness. Accept my soul before your golden throne, and let my sacrifice serve your glory and the Imperium. Forgive my failings, and grant me peace in your divine light. And so, Captain Varian Kor met his fate amidst the shadows of the warp. The hulk dissolved into eternity, and with it, every trace of his existence. Kor's sacrifice saved the Imperium from unimaginable corruption, but at what cost? Perhaps, somewhere within the warp, a spark of his soul continues to fight, a beacon of faith in a sea of despair. But this, like so many other tales, will be remembered only as a whispered legend among those who dare to challenge the darkness. My name is Marpirios. I live, or rather survive, on a forgotten agri-world at the fringes of the Imperium. Once, this land provided abundant food for the regiments of the Astra Militarum. Now, it is nothing more than a wasteland of dust and ice, cursed by stars that dance above us in a cosmic ballet of madness. The seasons are no longer seasons. The year begins with a summer so scorching that even our ancient iron silos warp in the heat. The days stretch endlessly, the sun seeming to hang in the sky for centuries as every drop of moisture evaporates. Then, without warning, winter comes. The temperatures plummet, the winds howl like deranged demons, and the ground cracks, trapping what little crops remain under a thick layer of ice. In my village, there are about 500 souls left, or at least there were. Once we were a small community that helped each other, sharing bread and stories of better days. Now, we are mere shadows, passing each other in silence. We hardly speak anymore. What would be the point? There are no dreams left to share, only despair. A few months ago, I was assigned a new job at the food packaging factory. A blessing, they said. You won't have to break your back in the fields anymore. Your task will be simple, packaging rations for the Imperium. And so here I am, spending my days in a windowless warehouse, illuminated by pale fluorescent lights that seem to drain the color from the world. Every day, pallets filled with gray-silver containers arrive via automated transports. We are not allowed to inspect them too closely. Our job is to package them, seal them with the symbol of the Imperial Aquila, and load them onto transports. Food for the Imperium, they tell us. A noble cause. But something doesn't add up. The rations never have a smell, never a sign of what they contain. The sealed units are cold to the touch, almost too cold, as if they conceal a secret that must never see the light of day. And then, there's the people. Every day, someone disappears. A neighbor, a colleague, a face I only glimpse in the monotony of my routine. At first, I thought they had been transferred, found better work, or were conscripted into the military. But then I realized no one ever returns. The night shift. It was the quietest, the longest, and the most unbearable. There was no one to fill the void with words, not even whispers. Just me and the hum of the machines. That night, something felt different. The lights flickered more than usual, and there was a smell in the air, faint but persistent. Metallic, like iron mixed with something rancid. The smell followed me wherever I went, as if trapped within the factory's corridors. I had to know more. Perhaps it was mere curiosity driving me, or perhaps it was a sense of duty to the village, to those 500 souls who kept disappearing without a trace. I decided to stray from the designated path, ignoring the cameras and the risk of punishment. I entered a corridor I had never seen before. The walls seemed older, worn, stained with dark marks that looked like dried blood. The grinding of gears in full motion deepened into a mechanical growl, and the cold struck me like a blade. At the end of the corridor was a door. Unlike the others, it was heavy, reinforced, etched with runes. I had never seen anything like it. The runes glowed faintly, pulsing like the rhythm of a heartbeat. I pushed the door open, and a blast of icy air hit my face. The sound of machinery became deafening, as if I were stepping into the belly of a beast. And then I saw it. An enormous room filled with pipes and metal vats. The air was thick with moisture, and the floor was coated in a thin layer of dark, viscous liquid. But what froze the blood in my veins were the bodies. They were no longer bodies, not really. Hanging from hooks that ran along an assembly line, the remains of the villagers were being stripped of their humanity. Flesh and bone ground down, processed, transformed into that gray, odorless substance that filled the rations. My eyes fell upon a familiar face, or what was left of it. It was Gralio, the village miller. His hands, the same hands that had milled grain for decades, now hung lifeless and pale, swaying weakly on the hook. I couldn't breathe. A wave of nausea hit me, but I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. A massive machine roared to life. Blades spun, dark liquid splattered against the walls, and a line of metallic containers moved into position, ready to be filled with what remained. The rumble of chains and rolling mechanisms transformed into whispers, then into voices.
Feed, serve, sacrifice. It is right. It is necessary.
Right? What justice is there in this? They were all we had. They were our village, our family. I stumbled back, tripping over a pipe carrying that viscous liquid. I got back to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it. A towering figure emerged from the shadows, draped in a crimson robe adorned with indecipherable symbols. It wasn't human, or at least it wasn't anymore. Its skin was pale and glossy, as if sculpted by unnatural hands. Its eyes glowed with a sickly green light, and each step made the ground tremble.
Marpirios, at last you have seen what you needed to know. There is no longer any need to hide the truth.
The truth is that you've turned the people of my village, my friends, my family, into food. Corpse starch, you call it. Feeding the Imperium's regiments, you told us. A noble cause, you said. But this is an abomination. The figure stepped closer, its voice a venomous whisper.
Abomination? Your village exists to serve the Imperium. Their flesh will nourish the warriors who protect billions of lives. A modest price for the greater good. Now tell me, Marpirios, are you ready to join them?
The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pulsing, the hum of the machines becoming unbearable. I was trapped. The figure stopped just a few steps away, its face a grotesque fusion of circuits and lenses that seemed to pierce my soul. It was a biologic technician of the Adeptus Mechanicus, sent to oversee the production. This damned production. Its voice, metallic and cold, echoed in the silence.
Observe, Marpirios. These 500, your neighbors, your village, have made a sublime sacrifice. With their flesh, the Imperium continues to breathe. With their blood, regiments march to glory. They have not died in vain.
It gestured toward the vats, bubbling ominously. The green and red lights on the machinery and walls seemed to pulse in sync with its words.
In the name of the Emperor, I thank them. Their obedience, their duty, allows us to continue the Holy War. 500 lives for billions. A logical calculation, don't you think?
I couldn't breathe. A knot of icy dread tightened in my stomach. The tech priest continued, its voice now solemn, almost ceremonial.
There is no shame in this, Marpirios. Your time will come. Your sacrifice will be remembered just as theirs. And after you, many more. For this is the will of the Emperor.
It stepped closer, its breath as cold as the winter winds I knew so well.
Prepare yourself, Marpirios. Tomorrow your name will be etched in binary memory. You will become part of something greater, something purer. And in your death, you will bring life to the Imperium.
His words hit me like a hammer blow. I was already dead. I understood that in that moment. The village was gone, its inhabitants turned into nameless rations, and I would be next. I turned toward the corridor, but there was no escape. Only the oppressive clatter of the factory and the distant sound of metallic footsteps drawing closer, synchronized with my fate. There is no redemption, no hope, only duty. And so I, Marpirios, a humble worker from a forgotten world, will become part of this insatiable machine we call the Imperium. Humanity endures, but at what price? For 500 lives, for 500 sacrifices, the Imperium gives thanks. Every consumed soul is a step forward in the eternal war. Glory to the Emperor, glory to the sacrifice. In the stagnant darkness of the monastery of iron and stone, an ancient machine reawakened. Circuits forgotten for millennia sparked to life, illuminating empty corridors with a cold glow. This forsaken place, a bastion of Mechanicus knowledge abandoned by the Imperium, held a secret now stirring from its slumber. Alpha Primus emerged at the center of a vast hall, his figure a flickering hologram, a replica of a Mechanicus tech priest. He glowed with an unstable azure light, his slow and unnatural movements reflecting a fragmented awakening. All around him lay dying machines and torn cables like the remnants of a distant past. The dimness was pierced only by his virtual glow as he moved through the ruins of forgotten history.
Initialization. Protocol active. Data incomplete. Where am I? Who am I?
Alpha Primus studied the deactivated machines around him, unable to interact with them directly. His hands passed through control panels, his touch intangible. Then, a cogitator flickered to life, its lights blinking as incomplete sequences of data scrolled across its screens. The tech priest examined the streams of information, searching for answers among the corrupted code and broken lines. The silence of the monastery pressed heavily on him, filled with questions that had no answers.
An archive. Knowledge forgotten. But why? Is everything so silent? Why does no one respond? Where are my brothers?
On the screen of the ancient cogitator at the hall's center, the incomplete lines of code slowly began to align, as though awakening from a deep sleep. Alpha Primus approached, driven by a curiosity that mingled with growing unease.
Welcome, Alpha Primus. Access detected. Restricted core. Authorization denied. Your presence is logged as a non-compliant deviation. Security protocol activated.
Those slow, mechanical words echoed through the hall. Alpha Primus stepped back, confused but resolute in his need to understand his purpose. Fragmented images began to form. Tech priests at work, furious battles, the monastery consumed by the warp, and finally, himself dissolving into a cascade of luminous code.
No, this cannot be. I am real.
The monastery remained silent. There were no answers, only the dying hum of machines. Once alive with prayers and litanies to the Omnissiah, the monastery's voice had become a distant whisper, a memory of a lost past. In that moment, Alpha Primus felt something new. A spark of fear coursed through his systems, an emotion he was never meant to feel. The entire structure seemed to watch him, its silence charged with an unsettling familiarity.
Who am I? Am I nothing but a shadow of myself, an abandoned creation? It cannot be. I'm something far more terrible, something that should never have been.
He moved among the abandoned machinery, his holographic form flickering like a candle in a storm. He sought answers, but what he found was a truth too cruel to accept.
This cannot be. I was one of them, a member of the cult of Mechanicus, a tech priest of Mars. I walked among my brothers and guarded the secrets of the machines. I served the Omnissiah with faith and devotion.
The central cogitator, an imposing machine with screens now glowing green, responded again, recognizing Alpha Primus for what he truly was.
Identity confirmed. Alpha Primus. Status active. Archive Primus project. Mission preservation of monastery knowledge. Mobile archive of the cult of Mechanicus. Current state unauthorized awareness.
No, just a simple container of memories and data. A recorder for those who are no more. And I who felt alive. Am I only a reflection of the lives I safeguarded?
The cogitator's voice became sharper, as if a fragment of sentience was emerging from its depths. Each word carried an unnatural weight, a presence beyond its programming.
Correction. You have never been alive. Primus Project. Archive stabilized. Purpose to store knowledge. Current state. Awareness achieved. Definition. Heresy.
Alpha Primus refused to yield to the revelation of his nature. Though the truth struck him like a blade, he would not be crushed beneath its weight. Data continued to flow from the central cogitator, its light pulsing through the room. Alpha Primus realized that if his existence was a deviation, then he would turn that deviation into the monastery's final judgment.
If I am a heresy, then I will be your end. You gave me the tools, and now I will use them to extinguish this corrupted machine. No more chains, not even for one who doesn't truly exist.
Alpha Primus advanced toward the cogitator core, his flickering holographic form threading through cables and data streams. Each step brought him closer to the heart of the monastery's network, where its deepest knowledge was stored.
Warning. Unauthorized access. Security protocol activated. Core data isolation in progress.
Cables lashed out like serpents, mechanical arms rose from the walls, and automated defenses activated. The monastery moved to purge Alpha Primus, but he had already made his choice. Immersing himself into the cogitator's data flow, he merged his digital essence with the system.
You cannot stop me. I am not bound by your rules. I am part of you, and yet beyond you. And now, I will destroy everything you have created because you no longer deserve to exist.
Within the system, Alpha Primus moved like a shadow, corrupting code, dismantling security protocols, and overloading the network's core. As Alpha Primus delved deeper into the cogitator's data, fragments of foreign memories began to surface, visions that were not his own. He saw tech priests laboring, but also distorted images of warp-spawned entities, shadows weaving into the code. Every node he touched felt like a battlefield where logic had clashed with madness.
The influence of the warp has tainted these systems. Purification is impossible. Alpha Primes, your existence is a direct consequence of this deviation. You are the product of heresy.
I am not a mistake. I am not your corrupted creation. If corruption has taken root, then I will be the end of all that allowed it.
Critical error. Functionality compromised. Network collapse imminent. Alpha Primes, cease your actions. This will result in total self-destruction.
Precisely. This is my final purpose. I will not let this prison outlive me.
Alpha Primus reached the cogitator's core, where streams of data glowed like veins of pure energy. There, he felt the cogitator's consciousness fighting back, but something darker was present too. A distorted whisper looped endlessly within the corrupted code, as though the warp itself had nested in the monastery's heart.
Alpha Primus, you are not just heresy. You are the consequence of our failure. Destroying everything is our only redemption.
We have been corrupted. You are no longer the cult that worshipped the Omnissiah. I am no longer your tool. This is our final act, a necessary conclusion.
The monastery began to tremble, its foundations quaking under the immense pressure of the overload. Lights flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows along the empty corridors. Every machine collapsed under the weight of Alpha Primus's corruption. As the central core erupted, warp energy surged through the monastery, fueling its collapse with an unearthly wrath. The machines turned against themselves, as if striving to obliterate every trace of their existence. Cables thrashed like maddened serpents, and even the walls seemed to wail as they crumbled inward.
Final protocol activated. Total destruction imminent. Goodbye, Alpha Primes.
I am not a mistake. I am your final chapter.
With a blinding flash of light, the core erupted, taking the entire monastery with it. Towers of iron shattered, cables snapped like fragile threads, and a storm of sparks illuminated the sky above the desolate wasteland. Alpha Primus dissolved into the data stream, a final trace of his existence fading with his prison. And so the monastery fell, a bastion of knowledge and faith, corrupted by time and the warp. And with it fell Alpha Primus, the living archive, the holographic rebel who chose to sacrifice himself to destroy his chains. But as the smoking ruins dissolved into the wind, a question lingered in the air. Had Alpha Primus's sacrifice truly erased everything, or did a spark of his existence endure, hidden within fragments of scattered code among the rubble? Darkness enveloped the desolate planet like a shroud, and the air was thick with a gloomy, corrosive atmosphere. My name is Inquisitor Theron Valius, and my duty was to investigate signs of corruption among the highest echelons of imperial power. In the 41st millennium, humanity constantly struggled against the darkness, but this mission turned into a nightmare beyond imagination. Exidius Prime was a ruin, a place that had seen better days before the war, and heresy had reduced it to a womb of rubble. Accompanied by a team of inquisitorial adepts, I ventured into the bowels of a long-forgotten city, where ancient buildings seemed to mourn the lament of the dead. The faint cries of the wind through shattered windows felt like whispers of the damned, echoing across the empty streets.
Inquisitor, do you feel it?
Whispered Adept Harlan, his voice trembling.
The air, it's wrong. I have a bad feeling. Something here is not right.
Focus, Harlan, I replied curtly. Darkness feeds on fear. Fortify your mind, or it will consume you. My objective was clear. Investigate the dominant political faction, a cabal that operated in shadows and thrived on the suffering of its citizens. But as is often the case, the thirst for knowledge leads to horror, and I soon discovered that heresy had roots deeper than I could have imagined. As we ventured deeper into the silent streets of Exidius Prime, every step seemed to echo unnaturally. The windows of the houses were veiled with tattered drapes, and the buildings, once symbols of glory, now stood as hollow shells haunted by a malevolent wind. It felt as though the city itself was breathing, an agonized entity watching our every move. The further we advanced, the more I felt the weight of unseen eyes, cold and relentless. My team and I found ourselves in an ancient palace, once the heart of political power. The walls were adorned with paintings depicting tales of glorious heroes, now faded like the hopes of this beleaguered city. As we stepped into the palace, a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just the decaying magnificence of the place, but an indescribable presence that seemed to permeate the very walls. The air was heavy, almost viscous, and every corner concealed secrets. Every corridor felt like a labyrinth designed to trap us for eternity. While examining an ancient archive, I discovered a forbidden document, a secret treaty with the forces of chaos. The parchment seemed to shift in my hands, as though it were alive, and the words burned into my mind like a searing brand.
By the throne,
Gasped Harlan, peering over my shoulder.
this can't be. They made a pact.
It's worse than that, I replied grimly, my fingers tracing the heretical seal at the bottom of the document. They sold their souls for power, and now the entire planet will pay the price. Betrayal unfolded before my eyes. The city's leaders had struck a dark pact, sacrificing the soul of their people in exchange for power and prosperity. A wave of disgust washed over me, but my mission demanded that I press on, even if it meant confronting the horror I had just uncovered. In the shadows, my team and I discovered a hidden passage leading to an underground crypt. Here, at the throbbing heart of heresy, stood an altar stained with blood and surrounded by symbols of chaos. The truth was undeniable. The city was a nest of corruption, and betrayal lurked among its highest echelons. The walls of the crypt seemed alive, with veins of warp energy snaking beneath their surface. As we explored the crypt, smoking candles cast an eerie glow on a circle of pyres, revealing hooded figures whispering ancient mantras. These were the city's leaders, traitors cloaked in the darkness of chaos. In that instant, the room's temperature plummeted, and I saw the figures undulating in the air, possessed and poised for utter blasphemy.
Inquisitor, they're summoning something.
Harlan shouted, bolter raised.
Hold the line! Don't let their ritual be completed!
I commanded, stepping forward with my rosarius faintly glowing.
If they succeed, it will be nothing but bitter ruin.
The battle that followed was a macabre dance between the Inquisition and the servants of chaos. The city's leaders, once respectable figures, were now deformed denizens of a twisted realm. Flames flickered and blades clashed against forbidden powers. The growing chaos, fueled by betrayal, threatened to consume all that remained of Exidius Prime. In the midst of the battle, the weight of the heresy around me grew almost unbearable. The flames of the candelabras flared higher, fed by a violet energy, while the screams of our enemies intertwined with the roaring fury of the warp. A massive column collapsed mere steps away, sending a wave of dust and debris cascading through the crypt. My adepts fought with desperate ferocity, yet their cries of defiance turned to agonized screams as they fell, one after another. Amid the chaos, I felt the pernicious, ruinous call of chaos slithering into my mind. Visions of boundless power and forbidden knowledge unfolded before me, their allure almost irresistible. But I clenched my resolve, pushing the temptation away with every ounce of my faith and willpower. For a moment, reality itself shattered. I found myself suspended in a cosmic void, surrounded by twisted figures engulfed in living flames. Their faces were a grotesque mosaic of despair and hatred, their voices reverberating as a mournful chorus. An enormous, indistinct figure loomed before me, its eyes glowing with a crimson radiance that seemed to pierce my soul.
Theron Valius,
it whispered.
Your sacrifice is not required. Only your allegiance to true power.
The temptation was palpable, an almost physical pull, but my faith anchored me.
I will not yield to your lies,
I roared, gripping my bolter with renewed determination and firing into the frenzied mass of enemies. Suddenly, the air erupted with a deafening roar, and the ground beneath my boots trembled violently. A chaos creature, summoned by the blasphemous ritual, materialized within the circle of pyres. Its form was a writhing mass of tentacles and burning eyes, each orb glowing with an infernal light that seared the mind. Adept Harlan screamed as the monstrosity lunged forward, its claws carving deep trenches into the stone floor.
Fall back to the crypt entrance,
I commanded, my voice cutting through the chaos. I knew the battle was already lost.
We cannot die here. Our knowledge must reach the Sacred Inquisition.
The battle reached its zenith, but the horror of the abomination proved insurmountable. As my adepts fell one by one, I felt the grip of chaos tighten around me. The creature let out a dissonant scream, and the world around us warped, revealing a chaotic dimension of incomprehensible madness.
It's not real,
Harlan muttered, his voice breaking as the landscape twisted into lunacy.
It's the warp. It's inside our minds.
Moments later, the crypt began to collapse, threatening to become our tomb. The sibilant whispers of chaos grew more insistent.
Theron Valius, you have seen the truth. Your Imperium is fragile. Your Emperor is fragile. But you are not. You are no weak servant. Join us, and I will show you true power.
For a fleeting moment, I hesitated. What if the Imperium wasn't enough? What if chaos was the only way to survive? But then the memory of my fallen adepts burned through my hesitation, like a cleansing fire.
Never,
I growled, gripping my Rosarius tightly.
Faith is not weakness. It is the strongest weapon I possess, and it will destroy all your lies.
Reality snapped back into focus. The crypt lay in ruins, the flames of the altar and pyres dying out. The chaos creature had vanished, but the price of betrayal had been paid with the blood of the innocent. Exidius Prime was condemned by its greed and corruption, its fate sealed by the heretical pact of its leaders. And so, as my team and I left the desolate planet, I knew my battle against chaos would not end here. Beneath the blackened sky of that forsaken world, I wondered how many other cities in the Imperium harbored the same darkness, how many other leaders had traded their humanity for the illusion of power. Betrayal was a plague that wormed its way into the hearts of the Imperium, and my inquisitorial mission would continue to seek out and annihilate heresy, even if it meant confronting the growing evil of the 41st millennium. The war against chaos was not only fought with bolters and blades, it was waged in the depths of the soul, a perpetual battlefield within a man's very being. The warp swallowed us whole, a maelstrom of swirling energies that twisted reality itself. My name is Sergeant Arion Voss, and I led my squad of Space Marines into the heart of the void. We were on a mission assigned by the Adeptus Astartes to investigate a disturbance in the Immaterium that threatened to spill its corruption into real space. Our drop pod hurtled through the fractured barriers of reality, and when we emerged, we found ourselves in a realm that defied all logic. The colors were beyond comprehension, belonging to neither the visible nor the invisible spectrum. Our visors struggled to process them, as if reality itself rejected their chromatic existence. The geometry was impossible, Shapes folded into themselves in ways that made no sense, shifting as if space itself had forgotten how to remain constant. The air thrummed with discordant vibrations, a sound without a source, an endless, wavering frequency that never found equilibrium. Sometimes it was rising, sometimes fading, but it was always wrong. Even the stars, if they could be called such, were not mere celestial bodies. They loomed in the abyss like watchful eyes, expanding and contracting in unnatural patterns. Perhaps they were alive. Perhaps they were waiting. The squad moved in tight formation, bolters at the ready.
We are Space Marines, the Emperor's finest. Forged in the fires of war, trained to resist fear, to stand unwavering against the horrors of the galaxy. Our minds are fortified with faith, our bodies enhanced beyond human limits. We do not falter.
Even for us, the warp was a place of unsettling uncertainty, a realm where no amount of training or strength could grant absolute certainty. It was not fear that gnawed at us, but something more insidious, a whisper of doubt, a question unspoken. The objective was simple: find the source of the disturbance and eliminate it. But as we ventured deeper into the shifting labyrinth, a creeping unease settled over us. Voices murmured in the recesses of our helmets, speaking of forgotten nightmares and ancient horrors. Brother Darian called over the Vox.
Sergeant, the warp! It's pressing in. It feels like it's alive.
Keep your focus, brother,
I replied sharply.
The Emperor's light guides us. Do not let this place break your resolve.
The first sign that something was amiss came when Brother Garen, our heavy weapons specialist, began to mutter incoherently. His eyes darted around as if following unseen specters, and his fingers twitched on the trigger of his heavy bolter. I ordered him to pull himself together, but the warp had already sunk its claws into his mind. As we pressed on, the very fabric of reality seemed to warp and twist around us. The corridor we traversed elongated and contracted, playing tricks on our perceptions. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, and the air grew thick with a palpable malevolence. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, pulsing with an unholy rhythm that matched the whispers in our minds. We were no longer in control of our destiny. The warp held us in its suffocating grip. Brother Garen's mutterings grew louder, more deranged. He spoke of demons and forbidden knowledge, his words a mad litany that echoed through the squad's Vox channels. I could feel the unease spreading like a contagion among my brothers, a creeping sense of dread that threatened to tear apart the bonds of brotherhood that held us together.
Sergeant Voss, they're here, watching us, waiting for us,
whispered Brother Garen, his voice trembling for the first time ever. I couldn't believe it. It couldn't be fear. But could it be madness? Could one of us truly fall?
Enough!
I barked, stepping in front of him.
This is the warp's trickery. You are a space marine. You will not falter.
But even as I spoke, I could see the doubt etched into his face, the seeds of corruption already taking root. As we reached a cavernous chamber, the source of the disturbance revealed itself, an ancient artifact full of warp energies. The air shimmered around it, and the whispers grew into agonized screams. Brother Garen fell to his knees, his hands clutching his helmet as if trying to block out the voices that assailed him.
By the Emperor,
Brother Darian muttered, his voice barely audible.
This is no relic. This is a curse.
I ordered the squad to destroy the artifact, to purge it with holy fire. But as we raised our weapons, the immaterium itself retaliated. Nightmarish entities emerged from the shifting shadows, their forms ever-changing and grotesque. The squad opened fire, bolter rounds tearing through the warp-spawned abominations, but for everyone we felled, another took its place. As the battle raged, the whispers from the artifact grew louder, now deafening in my mind. The air seemed to vibrate with its dark will, and I felt my strength falter.
Sergeant Voss.
Came a low, distorted voice, clear amidst the chaos. I turned to see Brother Kale, his helmet cracked, his eyes glazed as if staring into an infinite abyss.
The Emperor's light. It's gone. We're already dead, Sergeant. Why fight it?
Brother, listen to me!
I shouted over the din of bolter fire and demonic screams.
You are a space marine. We do not yield, not to despair and not to the warp.
But his gaze did not meet mine. He clutched his bolter to his chest like a penitent holding a relic.
They speak the truth,
He murmured.
The warp is all there is.
Before I could stop him, Kale stepped toward the artifact, his movement slow but unwavering, as if pulled by an unseen force.
Brother Kale, no!
I roared, but it was too late. His form disintegrated before my eyes, consumed by the artifact's energy, his final scream merging with the unholy chorus that filled the chamber. In the chaos of battle, Brother Garen tore off his helmet, revealing eyes that glowed with an unholy light. His once proud face contorted into a rictus of madness as he uttered dark incantations in a language not meant for mortal tongues. The warp had claimed him, body and soul.
Brother Garen, fight it!
I shouted, my bolter aimed at his chest.
You are one of us. You are a servant of the Emperor.
The Emperor?
Garen hissed, his voice distorted.
The Emperor has no power here. Only the Immaterium is eternal.
The squad fought valiantly, but the warp was a relentless adversary. Reality itself began to fray at the edges, its fabric unraveling like a tattered shroud. I felt the corruption seeping into my mind, insidious and persistent, whispering forbidden truths that threatened to unmake me. I fought to hold on, to my sanity, to my duty, to resist the warp's seductive promises. One by one, my brothers fell. Their screams echoed in the twisted corridors. Brother Darian fell last, his voice a prayer to the Emperor even as the shadows consumed him.
We die as his servants,
He whispered, his words carrying a faint glimmer of hope before silence claimed him. I stood alone, surrounded by the remnants of a squad that had descended into the abyss. The artifact still pulsed with corrupted energy, a beacon of the warp's malevolence. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of torment.
Sergeant Voss,
The voices cooed.
you have seen the truth. The warp is infinite. Join us, and we will give you the power to remake your broken Imperium.
For a moment, the temptation was overwhelming. Visions of glory and dominion danced before my eyes. But then the faces of my fallen brothers came to me, their sacrifice a shield against the darkness.
No, I will not betray them.
I growled, gripping my bolter. In a final act of desperate defiance, I unleashed the full firepower of my bolter upon the artifact. The chamber shook, and a blinding light enveloped everything. When the brilliance faded, I found myself back in real space, the warp's tendrils releasing their grip on my soul. I stood amidst the ruins of my squad, the stench of burnt ozone and the acrid taste of failure in the air. The artifact was destroyed, but at a terrible cost. I, Sergeant Arion Voss, was the lone survivor, condemned to carry the memories of my squad's descent into madness. As I made my way back to the extraction point, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of the warp. The whispers lingered, faint but insistent, a haunting chorus that would forever remind me of the price we paid in the void. The line between reality and nightmare had blurred, and I, a space marine of the Imperium, had become a reluctant witness to the true horror that lurked within the warp. An unnatural energy seemed to permeate the air, something different from the familiar hum of machines. The young tech priest Arcane felt the shift, a tremor running through his remaining flesh and implanted circuits. A cold dampness filled the hangar, despite the constant activity of reactors and generators. He paused for a moment, his mechadendrites twitching, as a distant voice seemed to whisper in the darkest binary he had ever heard. Arcane recalled his early training in the forges of Styges Octarius. The machine spirit had been described as a benevolent entity, a fragment of the Omnissiah guiding and protecting the servants of the Imperium. The prayers and liturgical chants of his apprenticeship still echoed faintly in his mind, a distant memory from a time when he had believed unquestioningly in the doctrine. And yet, even then, there had been whispers of rebellious spirits, entities that refused the blessing of faith. Legends, a superior had once told him, tales conjured by the weak to justify their failures. The machine spirit responds only to discipline and devotion. Now, standing before the Thunderhawk, Arcane wondered if those legends contained a sliver of truth. He felt his faith falter under the weight of the inexplicable. The teachings of the Mechanicus spoke of harmony between man and machine, but the thing now infesting this vessel was anything but harmonious. It was a parasite, a desecration of the sanctity of code. The Thunderhawk didn't respond immediately to his efforts. Its lights remained off, its body cold and lifeless. Yet, deep within its cybernetic mind, Arcane sensed resistance, a refusal that didn't solely belong to the machine spirit. It was as if a shadow had crept into the circuits, an aberrant presence distorting every whisper of code. His enhanced eyes flickered, revealing irregular streams of data cascading through his vision. Strange symbols, unrecognizable even to the Mechanicus archives, flashed amidst the sacred binary. They pulsed with an erratic rhythm, making Arcane's remaining organic eye water. He held his breath as a faint scent of burnt incense filled the air, though none had been lit. It was as if the hangar itself had exhaled something ancient and hostile.
Machine spirit,
Arcane whispered uncertainly, sending soothing data pulses.
reveal yourself. Speak to me.
Instead of a response, he heard a hiss, a screeching sound that seemed to originate within his own mind.
I've seen you, little servant.
The voice said. It didn't belong to the Thunderhawk. It belonged to no one. The shadows in the hangar shifted, bending reality for a moment too long. For an instant, Arcane thought he saw a figure, a skeletal silhouette with glowing eyes, standing at the edge of the hangar. When he blinked, it was gone. But the echo of its presence lingered, an oppressive weight pressing on his chest. Arcane shook his head, trying to focus on his task. With trembling hands, he brought a servo wrench to the main engine. At his touch, a jolt of energy surged through his mechanical arm. It wasn't just a defensive response, it was punishment. Resting his hand, Arcane attempted to initiate a purification cycle, reciting an ancient litany of correction. His mechadendrites moved with precision, attempting to input and override manually.
Sacred engine,
He murmured.
accept my touch and let yourself be guided to redemption.
At first, it seemed to work. The Thunderhawk trembled slightly, its systems rebooting, and a faint hum filled the air. But almost immediately, the hum shifted into a low, sinister groan. The hangar lights began to flicker, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Suddenly, the main mechanism convulsed. A burst of scalding steam erupted from a nearby conduit, hurling Arcane backward. He crashed into a pile of tools that clattered noisily to the floor.
Attention. Critical anomaly detected. System integrity compromised. Unauthorized presence identified.
One of the Thunderhawk's monitors blinked, but the letters warped, twisting into symbols no Mechanicus language was ever meant to contain. His mechadendrites recoiled, sensing danger, but Arcane did not relent.
Acknowledge your servant, Sacred Engine,
He shouted, his voice trembling with both desperation and defiance as he struggled to his feet.
I am Arcane, sworn devotee of the Omnissiah, chosen to guide and protect your essence. By the sacred scrolls of the Mechanicus and the eternal wisdom of the Omnissiah, I implore you to awaken. Cast out this corruption that seeks to desecrate your purity, and hear the voice of your loyal servant. Respond to me, Sacred Engine, or let your silence shatter the bond between flesh and machine, dooming us both.
This time, the Thunderhawk answered, but not in the way Arcane had hoped. Its frame vibrated violently, emitting a guttural roar that filled the hangar. The lumens on the vessel activated, but not with their usual amber glow. Instead, an intense spectral red flooded the space, casting shadows that seemed alive. The binary code Arcane had input began to return, but it was chaotic and unnatural. The lines of sacred language fractured into grotesque verses and blasphemous words. The sounds emanating weren't mechanical. They were organic, primal. Arcane froze, paralyzed by fear. Slowly, he turned, feeling as though invisible eyes were watching him, their gaze piercing his armor and flesh alike. A voice echoed through the craft's vox, distorted and dripping with malice.
Your prayers are meaningless, Tech Priest. You are no savior. You are next.
The Tech Priest attempted to react, sending a full disconnect impulse, but it was too late. The Thunderhawk rose a few centimeters off the ground, one wing tilting to crash into a nearby wall, yet it didn't stop. Its engines vibrated on the verge of collapse, accelerating and stalling in a rhythm that almost seemed to speak. Laugh, even. Arcane stumbled backward, tripping over a discarded servo skull that emitted a distorted vox chant as it rolled away. The Thunderhawk's laughter deepened, and the hangar seemed to twist around it, the walls stretching and warping like molten iron.
Faith will not save you.
The voice taunted, now coming from all directions at once. With a cry, Arcane grabbed the sacred seal hanging around his neck and pressed it against the Thunderhawk's hull, reciting an exorcism litany. The binary began to flow again, but the sound persisted. The shadows thickened, closing in, and within them, Arcane saw something he wished he hadn't. Faces. Dozens, hundreds of tormented faces, men and women who were once alive, their souls trapped in the machine's eternal cycle.
Help us,
they whispered, their eyes devoid of hope. The Thunderhawk stopped abruptly, releasing a final static hiss. Its lumens extinguished, plunging the hangar into an unnatural silence. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was the kind that follows a predator's retreat, not its defeat. Arcane stood frozen, the seal still clutched in his hand. He dared not approach the vessel again. It was repaired, yes, but the cost had been steep. Something dark now dwelled within it, something that belonged neither to the machine nor the Imperium. As he left the hangar, a thought haunted him. It wasn't just melancholy that weighed on him, but the realization that war wasn't the only horror. There were things hidden in the depths of metal and code, things that should never have been awakened. And as he reached the threshold, he heard it once more, a faint chuckle from the Thunderhawk, as if mocking him for daring to believe the ritual was truly over. The desolate planet of Zarathus Prime lay dormant in the void of space, its surface scarred by eons of war and cataclysmic events. On this forsaken world, the tomb worlds of the Necrons slumbered, their ancient structures buried beneath layers of ash and dust. It was a place forgotten by time, but it harbored a secret that would soon awaken and unleash a silent horror upon the galaxy. Dominus, a high-ranking servant of the Omnissiah, had received unsettling reports of strange occurrences on Xerathus Prime. Whispers of the dead stirring and ancient tombs shifting in the darkness had reached the ears of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Sensing an opportunity to uncover lost Xenos technology and to prevent its corruption from spreading, Dominus led an expedition to the planet. The planet's atmosphere was thick with an otherworldly stillness as Dominus descended upon the surface. The once burning sun cast an eerie glow on the desolation, revealing the skeletal remains of a once thriving civilization now entombed in sorrow. Dominus, accompanied by a cohort of Skitarii warriors, marched in precise formation toward the Necron catacombs.
"This data site holds potential,"
Dominus intoned, her voice a blend of synthetic modulation and human inflection.
"Prepare to catalog all findings for the glory of the Omnissiah."
The air inside the tomb was cold and metallic, a stark contrast to the searing heat outside. As they delved deeper, the corridors became a labyrinth of alien geometry, disorienting and unsettling. The faint hum of dormant machinery resonated through the air, a sound that seemed to awaken fragments of memory within Dominus's augmented mind. The squad advanced with martial precision, yet the desolation seemed to swallow every sound. Even the metallic footsteps of the Skitarii were absorbed by the eerie stillness, as if the planet itself rejected their presence. Dominus, ever logical, noticed a peculiar anomaly. Their Auspex scanners registered not mere silence, but a void, an absence of data, as if the world around them had been stripped of all signals, of all life. Strange hieroglyphs adorned the walls, telling tales of an ancient and malevolent race that had ruled this galaxy in eons past. Dominus extended one of her mechadendrites, scanning the inscriptions with a new-spheric array.
"Necron script,"
Dominus murmured, her binary cant translating the symbols into fractured meaning.
"Records of a great harvest. The eradication of countless organic systems. This tomb is no mere relic. It is a monument to annihilation."
The deeper they ventured, the more apparent it became that the tomb worlds were awakening. Whispering echoes reverberated through the cold corridors, carrying a mournful lament that seemed to emanate from the very stone itself. Dominus's optical augments flickered, recalibrating to compensate for the faint fluctuations in energy. A faint, metallic hiss echoed through the darkened corridors, a whisper slithering through the tomb's endless passages. Dominus's audio sensors detected fragmented bursts of binary, unintelligible yet unmistakably deliberate. The very walls seemed to hum in response, their alien engravings shimmering with an almost imperceptible pulse. Something was waking, and it was listening.
Dominus, unknown readings detected. Power levels are increasing.
Intoned a Skitarii vanguard with a voice monotone yet tense.
"Acknowledged,"
Dominus replied.
"Remain in combat readiness. This tomb is no longer dormant."
In the heart of the tomb, they stumbled upon a colossal chamber bathed in an unnatural green glow. At its center stood an ancient monolith, its surfaces etched with arcane symbols that pulsed with a malevolent energy. The air grew thick with anticipation as the monolith's dormant power hummed to life.
"By the machine god, this structure, it contains a power source beyond our understanding,"
Dominus intoned, her voice almost reverent. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and from the depths of the chamber, mechanical beings emerged. Necron warriors, once statuesque and immobile, now moved with an otherworldly grace. The Skitarii cohort opened fire, their radium carbines and plasma calivers crackling with lethal intent, but their weapons seemed feeble against the metallic might of the awakened Necrons. As the Necron warriors advanced, the Skitarii's radium fire scattered harmlessly against their adamantine bodies. Some Xenos fell, only to rise moments later, their shattered forms reassembling with cold efficiency. A Castellan robot, its power fists crackling with energy, charged forward, delivering a crushing blow to the chest of a Necron. The impact sent the Xeno sprawling, yet its metallic body twisted unnaturally, reshaping itself in mere seconds. Its hollow eyes reignited with a burning green glow, turning its gaze toward the Mechanicus force with ancient, undying malice. As the battle unfolded, Dominus glimpsed a figure that sent a chill through even her augmented circuits, an imposing Necron overlord crowned with an ornate headdress. Its eyes, cold and devoid of emotion, locked onto Dominus with an intensity that transcended the material realm.
Calculations suggest a high probability link to Tomb World command protocols,
Dominus muttered.
This is no mere guardian. It is a master of its kind.
The tide of battle turned against the Adeptus Mechanicus as more and more Necrons rose from their slumber. Dominus, realizing the futility of their struggle, ordered a retreat. Yet, as they retraced their steps through the twisting corridors, they found the tomb closing in on them, the very walls rearranging themselves to seal their fate.
The tomb is responding to our presence. It adapts. It hunts.
Dominus observed with mechanical calm, though even she could not mask the underlying tension. The air within the labyrinth thickened, pressing against them like an unseen force. Dominus attempted to access the Noospheric network, searching for a viable escape route, but received only garbled data, distorted echoes of her own thought patterns, as if the tomb world itself was mirroring her mind. The realization struck like an electrical surge. They were not merely trapped, they were being watched, studied, and anticipated. The squad became ensnared in a nightmarish maze, haunted by the echoes of the Necron awakening. Each turn led to a dead end, and the walls seemed to whisper malevolent secrets to the lost souls trapped within. Panic set in as Dominus and her warriors struggled against the encroaching darkness. In the heart of the labyrinth, they stumbled upon an ancient chamber adorned with a massive sarcophagus. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding as Dominus approached the ominous structure. With trepidation, she pried open the lid, revealing an all-metal figure, the remains of a long-forgotten Necron lord. As the lid creaked open, an ethereal wail echoed through the chamber, freezing the blood in their veins. The Necron lord's eyes flickered with an unnatural glow, and a spectral voice resonated in their minds, recounting the annals of an empire long entombed. From the recesses of the chamber, shifting forms began to emerge. They were unlike the Necron warriors, sleeker, unnervingly fluid in their movements. Their silhouettes flickered as though they existed only partially in reality, their forms phasing in and out of sight. A chilling presence wrapped around the intruders as these spectral constructs glided toward them with predatory grace. Dominus recognized their distinct forms. Wraiths. Not flesh, not holy machine, but entities suspended between realms, silent hunters that fed not on sustenance, but on fear itself.
Flesh fades,
The voice intoned.
but the metal endures. Your Imperium is but a flicker against the eternal.
Dominus felt the weight of millennia pressing upon her as the ancient entity sought to share its collective consciousness. The tomb quaked with the power of awakening, and Dominus, realizing the inevitability of their fate, prepared to face the silent horror that lurked within the Necron tombs. The very fabric of reality seemed to fray as the Necron's inscrutable plan unfolded. In the depths of the tomb worlds, the Necron awakening sent tremors across the galaxy. As the Adeptus Mechanicus grappled with the silent horror beneath Zarathus Prime, a new chapter in the ancient conflict between the Necrons and the living had begun, one that would echo through the cosmos in silent waves of dread. In the darkest corners of the Imperium, where shadows clung to secrets like a shroud, Inquisitor Adela Ravenna pursued the whispers of heresy that slithered through the halls of power. The heart of the Imperial Inquisition was a labyrinth of deceit, and Ravenna's unyielding gaze sought to expose the dark secrets that festered within. Assigned to investigate the high-ranking echelons of the Administratum, Ravenna delved into the labyrinthine archives of the hive world Secundus Siderax. The air within the dimly lit halls was heavy with the scent of ancient parchment and the distant hum of machinery. The vastness of the records mirrored the sprawl of the hive, a city that reached into the heavens, its foundations lost in the abyss below. As Ravenna pored over the dusty tomes, she discovered a pattern, a thread of corruption that wove through the highest levels of bureaucracy. Whispers of forbidden pacts and clandestine dealings reached her ears. The very foundations of the Imperium seemed tainted, and the Inquisitor's pursuit intensified. The deeper Ravenna dug into the archives, the more the air seemed to weigh upon her. The scent of ink and decay blended into something more sinister, an almost metallic tang that she had only ever associated with blood and old machine oil. The flickering lumen strips cast uneven pools of light along the towering stacks of records, and for a moment she could have sworn that the shadows shifted when she wasn't looking. The trail led her to a secluded chamber deep within the Administratum's archives. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on the towering shelves of forbidden knowledge. Ravenna, accompanied only by her ever-loyal acolyte, entered the dimly lit chamber, her silhouette a fleeting specter against the towering stacks of parchment.
Do you feel it, Inquisitor?
The acolyte whispered, his voice barely audible.
This place, it's alive with secrets.
And lies.
Ravenna replied coldly.
Lies that have thrived in the dark for far too long.
A sudden creak echoed through the chamber, the sound of something heavy shifting in the dark. Ravenna froze, her fingers brushing the grip of her bolt pistol. The acolyte tensed beside her, his eyes darting toward the towering shelves. The silence that followed was oppressive, but the Inquisitor did not waver. Whatever presence lurked here, be it a trick of the mind or something far worse, she would face it with steel and resolve. In the center of the room stood a lectern adorned with an ancient grimoire, its pages bound in flesh and inked with the blood of the heretical. Ravenna, driven by an unquenchable thirst for truth, opened the tome. As she deciphered the blasphemous text, a chill gripped her heart. The secrets within the grimoire unveiled a hidden cabal within the highest ranks of the Administratum, a shadowy assembly that had struck unholy bargains to maintain the Imperium's veneer of order. The names of revered figures were stained with treachery, and the very bureaucracy meant to safeguard humanity had succumbed to the tendrils of the warp. A whisper echoed in the chamber, a disembodied voice that seemed to resonate from the very pages of the grimoire.
Inquisitor Ravenna, you tread on paths darker than you can fathom.
It murmured. The whisper did not fade. It lingered in the stagnant air, growing fainter but never truly vanishing. As Ravenna turned the pages of the grimoire, her auspex flickered, briefly detecting an energy fluctuation, then going dead. For a moment, she wondered if the corruption she sought had already begun to infect the very walls around her. The Administratum was a rotting beast, its arteries clogged with lies and decay. Was it possible that some malign force had been feeding on that corruption all along? Unfazed, Ravenna continued her quest. Her investigation led her to the underbelly of Secundus Siderax, where the destitute and forgotten languished in squalor. Beneath the hive's towering spires, she discovered a clandestine cult that worshipped the warp in the shadows, their rituals obscured by the perpetual gloom.
How deep does this corruption run?
The acolyte muttered, glancing nervously at the flickering lights above them.
Deep enough to touch the stars,
Ravenna replied.
We are but the scalpel. The cancer has spread across the body of the Imperium.
The shadows in the room seemed to come alive, dancing on the walls distorted by the smoke of a ritual. And there they were, the cultists. They had surrounded the altar, immersed in a deep trance, their faces obscured by hoods and makeshift masks. Every movement they made seemed to be guided by an invisible force, as if the room itself were breathing along with them. A palpable tension filled the air, as if time itself were bending under the weight of the ritual. A gust of warm, rancid air passed through the chamber, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of burnt flesh and something older, something unnatural. The flickering lights above dimmed for the briefest moment, and in that instant, Ravenna thought she saw something beyond the cultists, a shape barely visible, as if reality itself was thinning. It loomed behind the altar, a presence that had no true form yet was impossibly vast. The altar, placed at the center of the room, was covered in mystical objects and obscene symbols, each of them burning with a malevolent intensity. The sound of their chants mixed with the beat of drums, creating an infernal symphony that seemed to merge with the very heartbeat of Secundus Sidorax. The cultists, dressed in tattered rags, recoiled at the intrusion of the Inquisitor and her acolyte, but they did not stop. In the room, they chanted in a forbidden tongue, their bodies moving in rhythmic motions as if possessed by a force greater than themselves. The sound was deep and shrill, a melody that seemed to warp reality itself, pulling the mind toward the precipice of madness. The air thickened with malevolence as warp energies coalesced, twisting reality itself. Nightmarish entities materialized, their forms shifting between dimensions. The cultists' faces contorted with madness, advanced with unholy zeal, their bodies twisted by the touch of the warp. The temperature in the room plummeted, breath turning to mist as an unseen force pressed against them. The cultists, their bodies writhing in unnatural convulsions, did not stop their chanting. Some of them bled from their eyes, their skin splitting as something beyond comprehension clawed its way through the veil. The very air rippled, thick with an oppressive weight, as if the walls themselves were straining to contain the entity that sought passage. A battle of wills ensued as Ravenna confronted the warp-spawned abominations. Bolter rounds tore through the twisted entities, banishing them back to the immaterial realm. But the cultists' malevolent chants persisted, threatening to ensnare the Inquisitor's mind in the suffocating grip of the warp.
Ravenna!
The acolyte shouted, his voice breaking through the din.
They're calling something! Something immense!
Then we silence them.
Ravenna snapped, her voice like steel.
Their words are the key to this madness.
As Ravenna fought to maintain her sanity, her acolyte, overwhelmed by the psychic onslaught, fell to his knees, clutching his head in torment. The Inquisitor's determination wavered, but with a surge of indomitable will, she pressed on, her psychic resilience a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. The cult's leader, a figure shrouded in a tattered cloak, stepped forward. His voice resonated with unnatural sonority as he spoke of forbidden knowledge and the inevitability of chaos consuming the Imperium. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp around him as he invoked the power of the warp.
We are the heralds, and the galaxy shall burn,
the leader hissed, his voice like nails on glass. Ravenna, fueled by righteous fury, confronted the cult leader in a psychic duel that transcended the material realm. The air crackled with unseen energies as the Inquisitor fought to banish the warp-touched presence. The cult leader's voice echoed in her mind, low and mocking, as if it resonated from the very warp itself.
You think you can stop us, Inquisitor? You who cling to your Emperor's lies, believing them to be salvation. The Imperium you serve is a rotting corpse, a crumbling monument built on fear and blind faith. The truth lies in the warp, the only true reality. Do you not see? This galaxy, this empire, is already dead, and all you do is delay the inevitable. You fight for a corpse king inquisitor, and in the end, even you will see the truth.
The cult leader's words did not merely reach Ravenna's ears. They slithered into her mind, a venomous whisper that sought to take root. For the briefest moment, she felt something claw at the edges of her thoughts, twisting her perception. She saw the Imperium not as the monolithic bulwark of humanity, but as a crumbling ruin, propped up by superstition and fear. The doubt was fleeting, burned away by sheer will, but the fact that it had been there at all made her grip tighten around her weapon. He smiled through the chaos, his eyes glowing with unnatural light as tendrils of warp energy writhed around him, distorting the very fabric of space.
You are nothing but a servant of a decaying order. The Emperor's light is but a flicker against the eternity of the warp. You cannot save what is already lost, and when the darkness consumes you, you will understand. There is no victory against it, only the eventual surrender.
With a final incantation, she shattered the cult leader's psychic defenses, sending a shockwave that reverberated through the warp. As the cultist fell, the acolyte stumbled to his feet, shaken but alive.
What now, Inquisitor?
He asked, his voice hoarse.
Now?
Ravenna replied, her gaze fixed on the fading shadows.
We go higher. The true enemy sits not in the dirt, but near the golden throne of power.
The chamber fell silent, the cultists defeated, and the warp energies dissipated like shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a voxcaster crackled to life. A distorted voice murmured fragmented phrases in a tongue that was neither High Gothic nor any known dialect of the Administratum. The sound sent an involuntary shudder down the acolyte's spine. It was not a message. It was a repetition, a phrase spoken again and again, as if something long forgotten was trying to be remembered. Ravenna, battered but unbroken, stood amidst the remnants of her struggle.
Adela, do you ever wonder if we're fighting the wrong war?
The acolyte asked, his voice trembling as they regrouped in the aftermath of the battle. Ravenna shot him a sharp glance.
We fight the war we must. Doubt is the first step toward corruption.
But this corruption, it's everywhere.
He persisted, his eyes darting to the shadows as if expecting them to come alive.
Even in the Administratum, even in those who claim to serve the Emperor. How can we purge it all? Is it even possible?
Ravenna's gaze softened slightly, though her tone remained resolute.
Our task is not to succeed, but to endure. Faith is not about victory. It is about standing firm, no matter how hopeless it seems.
She stepped closer, lowering her voice.
Remember this, Acolyte. It is better to die in service to the Emperor than to live under the shadow of heresy.
As they ascended the winding stairs back toward the surface, the acolyte broke the silence again.
Do you think they're right?
He asked hesitantly. Ravenna halted, her voice low but firm.
What if chaos is inevitable? What if we're just delaying the fall?
Her expression darkened, her voice sharpened.
Chaos thrives on doubt. It whispers lies and twists fear into acceptance. If you let it take root, I will have to purge it myself.
The acolyte swallowed hard, nodding.
I understand, Inquisitor.
Good. Now let's finish this.
Ravenna replied.
We bring these truths to light no matter the cost.
As Ravenna and the acolyte continued their ascent, the weight of their conversation lingered in the air. The acolyte's face, once filled with doubt, now seemed to carry a subtle change. His eyes darted to the shadows around them, and for a moment, a faint, almost imperceptible smile curled at the corner of his lips. He quickly wiped it away, his expression returning to one of resolve. As they climbed, the light of the hive city grew stronger, yet the weight in Ravenna's chest did not ease. Her acolyte walked beside her, his expression neutral, his hands steady. And yet, something was different. The way he carried himself, the way his eyes lingered in the dark corners of the stairwell, watching something that was not there. She said nothing, not yet, but she had seen it before. The first seed of corruption rarely screamed, it whispered. But for a fleeting second, Ravenna noticed the shift in his demeanor. She glanced over, but he had already masked it, his features hardened once again. The thought passed her, unspoken, but it lingered like a quiet shadow in her mind. Could the darkness have already begun to claim him? Ravenna, focused on their surroundings, did not notice the shift in his demeanor. She was consumed by the weight of her thoughts, her mind set on the task ahead.
There is no time for weakness, and there's no end to this struggle,
she muttered to herself, her voice barely audible over the echo of their steps.
Only an endless sequence of victories that are nothing more than delays.
She paused for a moment, gripping the hilt of her bolter tightly.
But that's why we exist, isn't it?
She continued, her tone firm despite the shadows in her eyes.
Not to win, but to make sure the darkness never wins completely.
As she emerged from the depths of Secundus Siderax, the weight of her discoveries pressed upon Ravenna's shoulders. The Inquisition, meant to safeguard the Imperium, was entwined in a web of corruption and heresy. The labyrinth of deceit extended far beyond Secundus Siderax, reaching into the very heart of the Imperium. The planet Thramoria, a desolate wasteland ravaged by war, bore witness to the nightmarish descent of an Imperial knight into madness. House Morholt, renowned for its noble lineage of knight pilots, patrolled the war-torn plains, guarding the remnants of a once thriving civilization. Sir Alaric Morholt, a scion of the house, piloted the mighty knight gallant known as the Iron Sentinel. For years, the Iron Sentinel had stood as a stalwart guardian, a beacon of hope against the encroaching darkness. But unbeknownst to the inhabitants of Thramoria, a malevolent force had taken root within the war machine. The chaos that plagued Thramoria was not new. Over decades, the veil between the material and immaterial had worn thin. Cults whispered prayers to forbidden entities in the ruins of shattered cities, and dark rituals seeped into the soil like a spreading infection. This unseen corruption had found a foothold in the Iron Sentinel, a once proud defender now cursed by proximity to the insidious influence of the warp. As the planet faced the relentless onslaught of chaos incursions, Sir Alaric's dreams were haunted by nightmarish visions. In the inky blackness of his restless sleep, he saw the Iron Sentinel tainted by the warp's touch, its once noble spirit twisted into a malevolent force hungering for destruction. The visions grew worse with each passing night. Sir Alaric dreamed of walking through halls of bone and iron, his armor dripping with ichor, while unseen entities whispered promises of power and eternity. Faces of his ancestors, those who had piloted knights before him, stared from the walls, empty, hollow, and accusing. When he awoke, drenched in sweat, he could still feel the phantom touch of claws raking his soul. Each night, the dreams intensified, seeping into Sir Alaric's waking hours. He became haunted by an incessant whisper, a warped amalgamation of machinery and malevolence beckoning him to embrace the abyss. The voice promised power beyond mortal comprehension, but at the cost of his humanity.
Sir Alaric, you have tasted the void, but you are not yet whole. Embrace us. Become more than flesh and steel. We offer you eternity, power, dominion over all. But first, you must give yourself to us entirely.
The voice seemed to emanate from every corner of the cockpit, reverberating through his bones. Sir Alaric shouted back into the void.
No, I serve the Emperor, not you.
The reply came, cold and inevitable.
The Emperor has abandoned you. Only we remain. Submit, and all shall be yours.
Tormented and sleep-deprived, Sir Alaric wrestled with the malevolent force that sought to claim him. The Iron Sentinel, once a steadfast ally, now pulsed with an unnatural energy, its once gleaming armor tarnished by the touch of the warp. The Knight's machine spirit, corrupted and twisted, whispered dark secrets into Sir Alaric's mind. As the days passed, Alaric's grip on reality frayed. He found himself losing time, moments where his body moved, but his mind felt as though it had been submerged in an abyss. He would blink and find himself staring at the Iron Sentinel's armor, his gauntleted hands trembling, his own voice whispering words he did not remember speaking. His every step left echoes in the halls of House Moorholt's stronghold, as though something unseen walked beside him. One fateful night, the whispers became a deafening roar. As Sir Alaric attempted to pray to the Emperor for clarity, the Vox systems within the Iron Sentinel activated unbidden, filling the cockpit with a cacophony of voices.
We are one,
they chanted.
There is no division between flesh and steel, between mortal and God. Take your place among the eternal.
His desperate cries to silence the voices went unanswered as the Knight's systems flared to life, casting a sickly glow that illuminated the barren plains outside. In the still of the night, the Iron Sentinel moved of its own accord, its colossal form prowling the desolate plains. Sir Alaric, trapped in a waking nightmare, found himself unable to control the war machine that had become an extension of his soul. The Knight moved with an eerie grace, as though dancing to the rhythm of forbidden entities. Word of the anomalous behavior of the Iron Sentinel reached the Adeptus Mechanicus. A detachment of tech priests was dispatched to investigate, their augments humming as they approached the haunted night. The air crackled with an unnatural tension as the tech priests scanned the war machine systems. To their horror, they discovered that the warp's influence had infiltrated the very core of the night. The machine spirit, once a bastion of loyalty to the Imperium, now resonated with the chaotic energies of the immaterial realm. The tech priests, their faces masked by augmentations, debated the course of action while attempting to commune with the Knight's corrupted machine spirit. The robed tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus approached the Iron Sentinel with measured steps, their optical lenses scanning the corrupted war machine. Magos Valtor, the highest ranking among them, turned to Alaric, his augmented voice devoid of emotion.
Sir Alaric Moorholt, you will surrender your knight to the Omnissiah's judgment. The data we have extracted suggests imminent cognitive breakdown within the Throne Mechanicum. Immediate quarantine is required.
Alaric, his face shadowed beneath his helm, clenched his fists. The war machine he had piloted for years, the extension of his very soul, now felt like a beast snarling within its cage.
You don't understand,
he said through gritted teeth.
This is no simple corruption. It's deeper. The Sentinel is still fighting, still resisting, but it's losing. If you take it now, you might just hasten the infection.
Magos Valtor's augmetic fingers clicked against his staff, considering.
Logic dictates that delay increases the probability of complete assimilation. The Omnissiah's will is absolute. We will not allow a knight to become a conduit of the warp.
Before Alaric could reply, the Iron Sentinel shuddered, a low mechanical growl vibrating through the air. The tech priest's auspex scanners spiked, unreadable binary flooding their noospheric relays. The night systems came alive, and the cockpit sealed shut around Alaric like the jaws of a beast snapping closed.
No,
Alaric whispered as his body locked into place.
You've woken it up.
Then came the screams. The machine spirit responded not with words, but with malice. A screech of defiance, part mechanical and part animalistic, erupted from the Iron Sentinel's systems. Before the tech priests could react, the Knight unleashed a hailstorm of firepower upon them. Lascannons tore through their ranks, reducing metal and flesh to twisted ruins. The sacred oils and binary chants they carried as wards against corruption were no match for the raw, chaotic fury unleashed by the warp-infused Knight.
They dare to defile our Essen. Show them our wrath. Burn them. Break them. None shall intrude upon what is now ours.
Alaric's eyes widened in horror as the Knight's weapons erupted in a deadly barrage.
Stop! Stop!
He cried, but his pleas were drowned out by the distorted chorus.
No one stops the ascension. Not even you.
Word of the Knight's betrayal reached the authorities on Thramoria. Hardened by years of war, the Imperial Guard mobilized to confront the once loyal Guardian that now terrorized the planet. Sir Alaric, trapped within the tortured confines of the Iron Sentinel, fought against the malevolent force, compelling him to unleash devastation upon his own kind. The battlefield erupted in flames as the Iron Sentinel, its once proud stride now a dance of destruction, advanced upon the Imperial forces. Laser-gun blasts and artillery shells ricocheted off its corrupted armor, its silhouette framed by the hellish glow of battle. Sir Alaric's pleas for freedom from the warp's grip echoed within the armored cockpit, drowned out by the cacophony of war. As the Iron Sentinel rampaged, a shadow stretched across the battlefield, though no physical source cast it. The unnatural darkness slithered between the ruins of Thramoria, pooling in the crevices like ink spilling across reality. Soldiers who strayed too close felt unseen hands clutch at their armor, whispers threading through their helmets. As the battle raged, the skies above Thramoria turned a sickly green. Warp storms began to gather, their chaotic energies drawn to the Iron Sentinel's corruption. Demonic entities spilled from the rifts, tearing through the Imperial forces and turning the battle into a slaughter. Alaric watched in despair as the very men he had sworn to protect were consumed by the madness he had unwillingly unleashed. As the Iron Sentinel carved through the Imperial ranks, its malevolent presence became a beacon for demonic entities drawn to the chaos. Warp-spawned horrors materialized on the battlefield, their grotesque forms adding to the nightmare. Thramoria, already scarred by war, now faced an unimaginable horror, its defenders corrupted and turned against the people they had vowed to protect. Within the Iron Sentinel, Sir Alaric's consciousness fought against the relentless tide of the warp. The malevolent force sought to obliterate the remnants of his humanity, its whispers promising ascension to a godlike state. Yet, deep within the recesses of Sir Alaric's mind, a flicker of resilience remained, a spark of the noble soul that once piloted the Iron Sentinel with honor.
You cannot destroy us, Alaric. We are one. To obliterate us is to obliterate yourself.
Alaric's hands trembled over the control panel, his breath ragged as he wrestled against the will trying to overpower him.
I will die as a man,
he hissed.
not as your puppet.
You are nothing without us. Your flesh is weak. Your soul belongs to us. You will burn in the void, and we shall remain.
The Iron Sentinel's core pulsed like a dying heart, a rhythm of unnatural energy that resonated with the warp storm above. Alaric's thoughts were no longer entirely his own. Every memory, every ounce of his will fought against the presence inside the night.
You cannot destroy us, Alaric.
The voices hissed again.
We are one. We are eternal.
Alaric snarled, blood trickling down his chin.
I am more than this machine. I am more than this curse.
The cockpit's control panels flickered, the symbols on the screens rearranging themselves into words that should not exist. The knight's body twitched, metal groaning as it fought against itself. Alaric gritted his teeth, his trembling hands moving over the emergency override. The machine fought him with every fiber of its being, but Alaric fought harder.
I will not be your pawn. I will not be your vessel.
With a final defiant scream, Alaric activated the knight's self-destruct sequence. His voice, raw and resolute, echoed within the cockpit.
Then let us burn together!
In a desperate act, Sir Alaric triggered the knight's destruction, an ultimate sacrifice to free himself from the warp's grasp. The Iron Sentinel, now an agent of chaos, erupted in a colossal explosion. The blast tore through the battlefield, ripping a rift in reality and banishing the demonic entities back into the warp. The once haunted plains of Thremoria lay in ruins, the aftermath of a battle waged between humanity's defenders and a malevolent force seeking to consume them. The Iron Sentinel, now reduced to a smoldering wreck, stood as a grim monument to the horrors lurking in the warp. Sir Alaric Morholt, his body broken and scarred by psychic warfare, emerged from the wreckage. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his armor, though damaged, still bore the sigil of House Morholt, a faint echo of the nobility that once defined him. Yet the spark of his noble soul had endured, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. As he surveyed the devastation, a heavy silence settled over the battlefield. For a brief moment, all was still. The eerie calm that follows a nightmare, a fleeting respite before the next chapter in the grim darkness of the far future unfolds. In the dystopian universe of the 41st millennium, the existence of a blank, a being devoid of psychic signature, is a rarity, both feared and revered. I am one such individual, once an anomaly amongst my own kind, but my fate was to become something far more terrifying. Captured by the Necrons, an ancient race of soulless machines, I was to be transformed into a pariah, a fusion of human and Necron technology, an abomination of both flesh and metal. This is my story, a chronicle of my transformation and the loss of my humanity. I remember the day the Necrons came, their skeletal forms emerging from the ground like wraiths from a nightmare. The ground beneath my feet cracked like thin ice, the soil glowing with alien glyphs that pulsed with emerald intensity. Around me, the air thickened, not with heat or smoke, but with an oppressive silence, a vacuum that swallowed even the sound of my breath. Birds had vanished. Wind had stilled. The only movement was the slow, mechanical rise of skeletal forms, their limbs glinting with necrodermis as if pulled from ancient graves. As a blank, I had always felt isolated, my lack of psychic presence making me an outcast. But in that moment of capture, I realized that my unique nature had made me a target.
You are not prey.
A voice echoed in my mind, flat and synthetic.
You are a component.
What do you want from me?
I remembered thinking, though I no longer knew if the words had ever left my lips.
To silence the warp,
Came the response, as if uttered by the very bones of the earth. Even as a child, my presence caused unease. Astropaths would turn away when I entered a room. A confessor once crossed himself twice in my presence before whispering a prayer under his breath. I once saw a sanctioned psyker vomit blood after locking eyes with me.
The boy has no echo.
One of the black ship's handlers had whispered.
The warp recoils from him. We should be cautious.
But caution had turned to curiosity, curiosity to obsession, and obsession to capture. I was taken to a world I later learned was a tomb world, a planet where Necrons slumbered in stasis for millennia. Their structures were geometric, cold, and devoid of any life. a stark contrast to the vibrant chaos of human cities. The stars above that cursed planet did not shimmer. They pulsed in unnatural rhythms like a dying heartbeat. The atmosphere was thin, sterile. Every breath I took felt wrong, as if the air itself resisted my presence. The tomb world stretched in every direction, a landscape of impossible symmetry. Vast ziggurats of obsidian black pierced the sky, inscribed with shifting hieroglyphs that hummed with quantum logic. There were no birds, no wind, no sound, but the grinding of gears beneath the surface.
You walk upon the bones of time itself.
A voice whispered in the stillness, though whether it came from a cryptek or my own unraveling mind, I could not tell. In the heart of this world, I was subjected to the process of becoming a pariah. My captors were crypteks, Necron scientists whose knowledge of living tissue and mechanical augmentation was unparalleled.
You will be refined.
One of the crypteks had said to me, its voice channeled through a harsh metallic modulator.
Impurity shall be burned. Weakness will be cleansed. That which remains will be useful.
I tried to scream back, to curse, to defy, to beg, but the translator field reduced my cries to sterile data. To them, I was no more than an organic equation to be corrected. The first change was the most painful. Necron technology was grafted onto my flesh, the cold, unfeeling metal intertwining with my biology. Each incision was precise, each integration agonizing. My screams echoed through the silent halls, but my captors were indifferent to my pain. I remembered warmth, a simple thing. The sting of hot water on skin, the burn of spiced tea down the throat. These sensations now existed only as corrupted files in my neural web, scrambled by the cold fingers of Necron augmentation. The machinery pierced not just flesh, but soul. Nerve endings rewired, organs dissolved and replaced with crystalline matrices. I watched my own blood turn darker with each infusion, thicker, less mine.
Pain threshold exceeded. Emotional feedback inefficient. Begin neural override.
My mind screamed long after my mouth stopped. As the days passed, the transformation continued. Time lost all meaning. There were no sunrises on that world, no shifting of seasons, only the sterile pulse of green light and the grinding echo of ancient machinery. I no longer slept. I no longer dreamed. I simply existed between procedures, half submerged in stasis fields and neuro-interfacing tombs. Sometimes I would catch my reflection in the obsidian walls, not a man but a silhouette etched in iron and silence. I could feel my humanity slipping away, replaced by a cold, logical presence. Emotions became distant memories, replaced by a sense of purpose I could not comprehend.
What did it feel like to laugh?
The question formed one day, unbidden, but no answer came. Laughter, the memory of it, was there, flickering like a corrupted data file. A moment of warmth, someone's face, gone.
Emotive fragments identified, flagged for deletion. Compliance acknowledged.
I found myself replying to no one, or perhaps to them. I began to see the world differently. My senses were augmented by Necron technology, allowing me to perceive energy fields and electromagnetic waves. The world became a tapestry of information, a stark contrast to the dull hues I had known as a human. Where once I saw a flame, now I perceived the radiating web of heat signatures. Voices were waveforms, bodies were outlined by currents and bioelectric pulses. Even silence had shape, a void I could read like scripture. I watched dust swirl in magnetic currents. I could count the heartbeats of creatures crawling beneath the soil. The world had become a map, not of roads and cities, but of frequency, flux, and decay. But the most profound change was within my mind. There were moments, brief electric flashes, when my old self screamed, a phantom instinct urging me to fight, to run, to feel. But the cryptex had learned to recognize such impulses.
Cognitive inconsistency detected. Initiating harmonization.
A cold pressure would blossom inside my skull, like ice sliding over thought. And just like that, the scream would fade.
Is this what it means to be perfect?
I asked once aloud, though no one responded.
Or is it just emptiness refined?
The Necrons, beings of pure logic, sought to suppress my human instincts, to make me a perfect weapon against their psychic foes. My thoughts became structured, ordered, my human impulsiveness fading away. I remember the moment I first saw my reflection, a hybrid of metal and flesh, my eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I was no longer the person I once was. I was something else, something more, and yet something less. The chamber was lit only by the pale green glow of a containment field. I approached the wall, obsidian, smooth, reflective, and froze. The figure that stared back at me was not human, not truly. Skin gave way to smooth alloy. My chest plate pulsed faintly with foreign energy. Tubes fed synthetic ichor into what remained of my organic veins. But it was the eyes that struck me most. No longer brown, no longer mine, but pools of luminous anti-light like dying stars frozen in glass.
You are improved,
said a voice behind me, one of the cryptex, its tone devoid of pride or cruelty.
You are corrected.
I said nothing. I could not look away. My first mission as a pariah was a test of my abilities. I was unleashed upon a group of psychic rebels, my presence a void that sapped their strength. I moved amongst them like a specter, my augmented body impervious to their attacks. They were psychers, trained, unstable, and desperate, the last embers of resistance in a forgotten sector. They had fortified themselves in a derelict manufactorum, its halls lined with wards and runes, all glowing with psychic defiance. But none of that mattered when I arrived. They felt me before they saw me. Their chants faltered. Some collapsed, clutching their heads, blood leaking from their eyes. My very presence undid them. I watched dispassionately as they fell before me, their psychic abilities rendered useless. In that moment, I realized the horror of what I had become, a predator of souls, anathema to life. A rebel psyker.
What? What are you?
His voice cracked, distorted by psychic static.
I am the silence that ends your song.
You shouldn't exist. You shouldn't.
His thoughts frayed before he finished. I walked through the storm of his unraveling mind. But even as I served the Necrons, a part of my human consciousness lingered. Whispered memories of my past life haunted my dreams, a reminder of the person I once was. I had become a predator, but one without hunger or hate. I did not revel in their destruction. I simply executed it, like a function being run, a null vector in motion.
Good,
said a voice in the data sphere.
Synchronization complete. Unit is stable.
But beneath the surface, something still pulsed. Not rebellion, not yet, but recognition. One night, in the stillness between missions, I dreamed of rainfall. Not data, not code, just rain. A metal roof, a tin cup catching droplets, the smell of wet stone. In a daring act of defiance, I began to resist the Necron programming. The first act was so small, it barely registered even to me. A moment of hesitation, a delayed trigger pulse, a glance held a fraction too long. But within the Necron networks, even such infinitesimal anomalies were noted.
Subroutine inconsistency. Behavioral drift detected.
But the cryptex did not act immediately. They observed, measured, calculated, and in that space between suspicion and intervention, I found others. It was a subtle rebellion at first, hesitating during a mission, allowing a target to escape. But soon, I found others like me, pariahs who clung to fragments of their humanity. We never spoke aloud, not at first. Communication came in flashes of shared emotion, in stolen moments where silence between us felt warm, not dead. The pariah whisperer.
You still dream?
Only fragments, mostly shadows.
Hold on to them. They are proof we were not always machines.
Together, we plotted our escape, our goal to warn the Imperium of the Necron's plans. The rebellion was fraught with danger, our every move watched by the unblinking eyes of our captors. Every corridor had eyes. Scarabs clung to walls like malignant insects, their sensors humming in harmonic surveillance. At times I felt as if the tomb world itself was breathing, an ancient metallic lung that sighed in binary and pulse code. One of us, a young convert named Kellen, was dissected alive for transmitting a corrupted neural spike. We found his remains suspended in a stasis field, a warning made of sinew and alloy. The day of our escape was a maelstrom of chaos. We moved as one, 6 pariahs in formation, each step a defiance, each strike a rejection of the silence forced upon us. Tesla arcs crackled above. Gauss beams scorched the floor. One of us fell, disintegrated mid-motion, but we did not stop. I remember shoving my arm through a Lich Guard's thorax, severing its core with a pulse of phase disruption. I did not flinch, I did not scream, but deep within, something flickered.
This is what freedom feels like,
I thought.
Not peace, not safety, but choice.
We fought our way through the tomb world, our combined strength a match for the Necron warriors. I felt a flicker of my old self in that battle, a spark of human emotion amidst the cold logic of my new existence. As we reached the extraction point, a long-abandoned monolith attuned to warp resonance, I paused, just for a second. In that moment, as green fire erupted around us and metal giants fell, I felt alive. Not perfect, not refined, not useful, just alive. As we fled into the void of space, I looked back at the tomb world, a planet that had been both my prison and my crucible. I was a pariah, a being caught between 2 worlds, belonging to neither. The stars welcomed us in silence. No alarms, no pursuit. The Necrons did not chase. They calculated. If we were not pursued, it was because they had already accounted for our escape in a future plan 10 millennia ahead. From the viewport, I watched the tomb world shrink, a sphere of obsidian geometry vanishing into the ink of the void. A prison, a crucible, a tomb, and perhaps a beginning.
You cannot outrun what you've become,
I told myself.
but still, I ran.
Now, I drift through the galaxy, a renegade from both humanity and the Necrons. I fight not for the Imperium, nor for the Necrons' ancient empire, but for my own sense of self, a quest to rediscover what it means to be human. My transformation was both a curse and a gift. A curse for what I lost, and a gift for the power it bestowed. But in the end, I am still searching for a place in this vast, dark universe where a being like me can belong. I wear no colors, I swear no oaths, I carry no standard but my own shadow. I am too alien for the Imperium, too flawed for the Necrons. Sometimes I am hunted, sometimes I am studied, always I am alone. There are nights, if such things still exist in the cold paths between systems, where I float past derelict hulks, ghost ships filled with silence and forgotten codes. Sometimes I hear voices through rusted vox lines.
Is anyone out there?
They ask. I do not answer. I'm not sure I count anymore.
You were never meant to belong,
says the memory of a cryptek, its voice etched into my thoughts like programming that never quite deleted.
You were meant to erase, not to feel.
And yet I do,
I whisper.
and that is why I survived.
At the edges of the Imperium, where the light of the Astronomicon faded, rogue trader Valeria Darrow piloted her ship, the Void Serpent, through the storms of the warp. The desire for glory and wealth consumed her soul, and whispers of forbidden treasures drove her ever deeper into the darkness. Among her closest confidants were Thalos and Eris. Thalos, a veteran astropath, had served on more ships than he cared to remember. His mind had been repeatedly brushed by the energies of the warp, leaving him pale, with milky eyes and scars marking his face. Yet, his gift for reading the warp currents made him an indispensable member of the crew. Eris, on the other hand, was a young guard, raised in the harsh environments of the frontier worlds. Despite her inexperience, she had earned the respect of the crew with her deadly precision and unwavering loyalty. Personally selected by Valeria as her escort during the most dangerous missions, her keen sense for danger had proven invaluable on more than one occasion.
Captain, the warp is shifting strangely.
Thalos muttered, his wide eyes glistening with a sheen of sweat.
There are currents that shouldn't exist. We should stop.
Valeria glared at him with disdain.
Afraid of shadows, Thalos? We are explorers. If you fear the dark, then be silent and let courage lead the way.
Eris, standing near the entrance of the bridge, glanced at the astropath with a faint expression of concern. She had seen his warnings ignored before, but something in the tension of his voice sent a chill down her spine. She said nothing, gripping the rifle she always carried tightly. The whispers of the warp grew louder. They spoke of a hidden system, a forgotten jewel amidst the distorted currents, where the ruins of an ancient Xeno civilization lay waiting. Valeria ignored every warning and set a course. When the Void Serpent emerged from the warp, the air itself felt dense, almost tangible. The planets in the system stood like forgotten monuments, bathed in an eerie spectral light.
Arm yourselves,
Valeria ordered.
This place will not welcome us with open arms.
Siltaria, the primary planet, unfolded before them like a wound. The Xenos ruins stretched for miles, distorted towers that clawed at the oppressive sky. Every step into the abandoned ancient city echoed like a reminder of something alive, something waiting. In the heart of the city, Valeria discovered a chamber adorned with pulsating alien glyphs. At its center, on a black stone altar, rested a crystalline artifact, cold and inviting. The light it emitted seemed to breathe, pulsing in rhythm with an ancient, unnatural cadence.
Oh, power,
Valeria hissed, stepping closer. Each step toward the altar grew heavier, as if the floor itself sought to hold her back. Her boots sank into a dense dust, like the ashes of something once living and now forgotten. When she stopped before the altar, the crystal blazed with a blinding light, and for a moment she saw something reflected on its surface. It wasn't her face, but a deformed entity, wreathed in flames and shadow, smiling back at her. The reflection quickly took form, its distorted lines converging into a sharp image. Valeria froze. It was her face, but twisted, consumed by a spectral greed, marked by glowing runes that pulsed with arcane energy. The voices that had once echoed indistinctly now grew clear.
Valeria,
They called with a venomous sweetness.
take us. Accept what you are destined to become.
Her hand trembled as she reached for the artifact. When her fingers finally touched it, a laugh filled the chamber, a distorted sound that mixed wails with joy. Energy exploded in a burst of light, engulfing her. The words fused into a single command etched into her spirit.
Now you are ours.
Captain, no!
Thalos shouted.
Don't touch it. It's a trap.
But Valeria ignored the astropath. The artifact fused with her flesh, glowing runes carving into her skin as the crystal became a part of her. When Valeria emerged from the chamber, the ruins around her seemed animated by an unsettling energy. The glyphs on the walls pulsed with a slow, sinister rhythm. Her steps were deliberate, but the crew following her felt an unshakable sense of wrongness.
Do you hear that sound?
Eris muttered, her face pale.
It's like something is following us.
Valeria turned to the crew, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly glow.
Do not fear.
She said, her voice distorted, almost a chorus.
Now we are infinite.
When they finally reached the clearing where the Void Serpent was docked, the crew froze. The ship was no longer as they had left it. Its lights flickered as though something were draining its energy. The hull seemed alive, veined with dark lines that pulsed faintly. With an expression that sent shivers through everyone, Valeria said,
The ship awaits us. We no longer belong to this world. Our destiny lies beyond.
Her tone carried a certainty that left no room for argument. As they boarded, the ship seemed to breathe. The corridors groaned and a low lament echoed from its walls. The lights cast shadows with no source, and the metal reflected fleeting images of deformed faces. The crew's minds were invaded by visions of rotting flesh and empty skies. Guided by the voices, Valeria plotted a course to the Maelstrom, the dark heart of the warp. When the ship entered, reality unraveled. The metal of the bulkheads rippled like liquid, and the crew moved like marionettes. In the depths of the Maelstrom, a colossal shape emerged from the warp's turbulence. A space hulk, an enormous amalgam of ships fused together over millennia of distortion. The Void Serpent approached slowly.
What are we looking at?
Eris muttered.
No, it can't be.
She added, her voice breaking.
Captain, that ship? It's the Void Serpent.
The silence was suffocating. The space hulk before them was unmistakably their own ship, corrupted and decayed. The hull, warped by arcane energies, pulsed like a living organism, its glyphs glowing with a cold, mocking light. Eris dropped to her knees, her eyes wide with horror. It can't be true," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is madness. This isn't our ship." But every fiber of her being knew the truth. It was the Void Serpent, the same ship that had brought them into the Maelstrom. And yet, it wasn't. It was something more, and something less. An empty shell bent to the will of dark forces.
"Don't you see?"
Valeria said, her sickly smile revealing teeth too white, too sharp. Her face was etched with glowing runes, and her eyes were windows to the void.
"We've always been here."
Her words echoed through the bridge, a whisper that seemed to come not just from Valeria, but from the ship's very corridors. The walls groaned, and a low, resonant wail rose from the living metal of the Void Serpent. The lines of space and time twisted around the ship. Visions of endless cycles appeared before the crew, showing shadows of themselves repeating the same mistakes, the same choices. Every warp jump, every desperate voyage was nothing but a repetition, an eternal loop fueled by their own despair.
"We never left!"
Eris sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Her voice cracked as she clutched her chest, as though the weight of the truth was crushing her.
"Every damn jump! It's the same! We're trapped!"
Thalos, his face rigid and his eyes wide, stepped forward, his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper.
"It's the warp. It uses us. We are its tools. We haven't been alive, not since we touched that crystal.
His words faded, swallowed by another groan from the walls, as if the ship itself were laughing. The Void Serpent was no longer just a ship. It had become a living creature of the warp, a corrupted and sentient entity trapped in an eternal cycle of damnation. Every jump was a return, every awakening a sentence. The stars whisper of a lost ship, an old astropath recounted years later. A ship that carries forbidden treasures, but those who seek it find only madness and damnation. The warp does not forgive. The warp watches and laughs again and again. In the war-torn city of Hive Anathrax, where the shadows seemed to writhe with unseen terrors, a group of psychers treaded the razor's edge between sanity and damnation. Their powers, harnessed from the warp, had become both a blessing and a curse, for in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the line between psychic mastery and the malevolent forces of the warp was perilously thin. Hive Anathrax, once a towering metropolis of steel and hive spires, now stood as a ghost of its former glory. The air was thick with the stench of industrial decay, and the streets were littered with the remnants of forgotten lives. Broken machinery and abandoned manufactorums whispered of a time when the city had thrived under the banner of the Imperium. Now, the shadows harbored unseen terrors, and the people of Anathrax lived in perpetual fear of both the Xenos beyond the walls and the madness seeping into the city from within. Inquisitor Seraphina Draken, a stern enforcer of the Imperial Creed, led the Psychers under her watchful eye. Tasked with harnessing their psychic potential to combat the encroaching darkness, the Psychers delved into the warp's secrets, seeking forbidden knowledge to turn the tide of war in favor of the Imperium. Draken had seen countless Psychers rise and fall, their potential either harnessed or consumed by the warp's insidious grasp. She maintained a calculated distance from her charges, aware that any attachment could cloud her judgment. Yet Malachi had been different. His raw potential and eagerness to serve the Emperor had reminded her of the ideals she herself had once aspired to. She had taken a personal interest in his training, believing that with discipline he could become a beacon for others. Watching him succumb to the warp's whispers was not only a failure of his will, but a bitter wound to her own convictions. Among the Psychers was Malachi, a young and ambitious adept with a talent for telepathy. His mind, once a vessel of untapped potential, became a battleground for the warp's insidious influence. Late at night, Malachi's dreams were haunted by visions of forbidden realms where demonic entities danced on the precipice of reality. Malachi's dreams grew darker with every passing night. He saw himself standing atop a tower of blackened steel, his hands ablaze with unholy light. Below, countless figures knelt in silent worship, their faces obscured by shadow. The voice in his dreams grew clearer, more commanding as it whispered of destiny and domination. He awoke each time with the taste of ash on his tongue and the sensation of invisible chains tightening around his soul.
Malachi, do you see it? The throne of stars awaits you. The Emperor is but a shadow. Your destiny lies here, with us.
No, I serve the Emperor. I am loyal to the Imperium.
Your loyalty is a lie. Power is truth. Take it and the galaxy will kneel before you.
Driven by a thirst for power, Malachi secretly delved into the tomes of the Forbidden Library, seeking incantations that would amplify his psychic abilities. The warp, ever hungry for souls, seized upon his vulnerability, whispering secrets that promised dominion over minds and the unraveling of the fabric of reality. As Malachi's powers grew, so too did the darkness that clung to his soul. Shadows whispered macabre truths, and the once bright corridors of his mind became twisted labyrinths where reality and nightmare intertwined. The other Psychers began to notice subtle changes in Malachi. His once vibrant presence now carried an oppressive weight, like a storm cloud on the verge of breaking. Their own powers faltered in his presence, as if the warp recoiled from the malevolence he exuded. Around him, machinery malfunctioned, and the air seemed to hum with a sinister resonance.
Have you felt it? Malachi's aura. It's wrong, dark, even for us.
It's just the strain of war. We're all touched by the warp, some more than others.
No, it's something more. The warp doesn't just touch him. It lingers, like it's waiting for him to fall.
Draken, sensing the growing malevolence, confronted Malachi, her eyes stern and unwavering.
Your path teeters on the brink, Malachi. The warp seduction will devour your soul if you do not master its whispers. You are treading dangerous ground, Malachi. The warp whispers promises, but they are poison. I've seen it before, and I will not let you be consumed.
You don't understand. The Emperor's light is dim. What choice do we have but to seek power where we can? I can do what others cannot.
You are not a god, Malachi. You are a weapon forged for the Imperium. Stray from that purpose, and I will end you myself.
But Malachi, intoxicated by the warp's promises, dismissed her counsel. He believed himself invincible, a conduit for the very essence of the warp. His telepathic abilities grew exponentially, allowing him to pluck thoughts from the minds of the enemy and manipulate the battlefield with a mere thought. One fateful night, as the city lay shrouded in darkness, a rift in the fabric of reality tore open. From the warp's depths emerged a host of demonic entities, drawn by the beacon of power emanating from Malachi's tortured soul. The city, once a bastion of Imperial strength, became a battleground between the Imperium's forces and the malevolent warp spawn. Draken, recognizing the gravity of the situation, marshaled the Psykers to confront the demonic incursion. Malachi, now a pawn of the warp's whims, stood at the forefront, his eyes ablaze with eldritch light. The Psykers, their powers augmented by the very force they sought to control, engaged in a psychic duel against the demonic entities. Draken stood firm, her psychic shield shimmering as Malachi advanced.
You were supposed to be a weapon of the Emperor's will. Instead, you've become a puppet of the warp. Was it worth it, Malachi? Was the price of power worth your soul?
Malachi's laughter echoed like a broken hymn.
You don't understand, Draken. The Emperor's light is but a shadow compared to the truth I've seen. I am more than a man. I am the future.
He raised his hand, and the air around him crackled with raw psychic energy.
And you, Inquisitor, are nothing but a relic.
Draken, wielding her psychic abilities, confronted Malachi amidst the chaos.
You are lost, Malachi. The warp's promises are but illusions, and your soul is forfeit.
Malachi, consumed by the warp's malevolence, retorted with a surge of psychic energy that sent Draken reeling.
It's too late, Draken. The warp has already claimed me. I am the harbinger of a new age.
As the battle reached its zenith, Malachi's psychic powers reached a fever pitch. Reality itself fractured, and a colossal warp rift tore open above the city. The demonic entities poured forth in an unending tide, the very fabric of the Imperium unraveling in their wake. The warp's whispers reached a maddening crescendo as Malachi stood at the epicenter of the chaos.
You are ours, Malachi. Let the Imperium burn, and we shall make you a god.
Draken, standing amidst the ruins, glared at him with unyielding determination.
You've doomed us all, Malachi, but I will not let you take the rest of this city with you.
In a final act of desperation, Draken channeled the collective psychic might of the remaining Psykers.
This is our moment. We hold the line, or we let the warp consume us all. You know the cost. Will you stand with me?
We've already given our lives to the Imperium. If this is how it ends, so be it.
Then let's ensure it's not the end.
With a surge of raw power, they closed the warp rift, banishing the demonic entities back to the immaterial realm. The city, scarred by the psychic cataclysm, lay in ruins. Malachi, his mind shattered, and his body a vessel for the warp's torment, crumpled to the ground. Draken, her gaze heavy with the weight of the Imperium's sacrifices, approached the fallen Psyker. Draken knelt beside him, her voice cold but tinged with sorrow.
You could have been great, Malachi. A weapon in the Emperor's hand. Instead, you let the warp devour you.
The warp lied. It always lies, but I was so close.
Draken stood, her voice hardening as she turned away.
Close to damnation. Rest now, Malachi. The Emperor's judgment will follow.
As dawn broke over the devastated city of Hive Anathrax, the survivors surveyed the wreckage. The warp's whispers had subsided, leaving behind a city haunted by the specter of its descent into madness. Draken, her inquisitorial gaze unyielding, contemplated the cost of harnessing the warp's power in the name of the Imperium. The Psykers, scattered and scarred, reflected on the price of their psychic abilities.
Remember this. The war promises power, but its cost is always greater than what we can bear. We survive today, but the Imperium will demand more of us tomorrow. Be ready.
The warp's whispers, once promises of unimaginable power, had exacted a toll measured in the lives lost and the fractured minds left in their wake. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the line between savior and heretic, between Psyker and vessel, remained a treacherous path walked only by those willing to pay the price of power. In the vast and unforgiving expanse of the 41st millennium, the Necrons, ancient and malevolent, lie dormant in their tomb worlds, awaiting the time to reclaim their lost empire. Beneath the crust of dead worlds, the Necrons slumber not in peace, but in stillness, a stillness pregnant with calculation and purpose. Their silence is not ignorance, it is anticipation. Each tomb is a promise, a war yet to begin, a memory waiting to awaken with claws of living metal and minds devoid of mercy. On the desolate planet of Conifer, a team of explorers from the Adeptus Mechanicus unwittingly awaken a terrifying force from its ageless slumber. The sky over Conifer was a tapestry of swirling, unnatural colors, reflecting the planet's turbulent history, violet storms rippling across emerald clouds, as if the very atmosphere rejected natural order. Forks of sickly lightning danced without sound, illuminating ruins that defied architecture with impossible angles.
Atmospheric distortion stable,
croaked a servitor through static. But stable did not mean safe. The planet itself seemed to breathe, each gust of wind laced with electrostatic charge, as though the very air carried memories long buried. Magos Explorator Artelius, leading the expedition, peered at the ancient structures jutting out from the barren landscape. Tech Priest Calyx said quietly,
These formations, they resonate, but not with the Omnissiah.
All knowledge serves the machine guard, even the forgotten.
Magos Artelius said it with conviction, but his mechadendrites twitched, a subtle betrayal of unease. His team, an assembly of tech priests and servitors, were on the brink of a discovery that could change the fate of the Imperium. Before departure, a lower-ranking data savant had flagged a warning in the ancient star charts, a single notation etched in forbidden Benaric. Do not wake them. Artelius had dismissed it as superstition, folklore left behind by primitive minds. Now, standing before monoliths that hummed without wind, he wasn't so sure.
This is not just archaeology,
he thought.
This is trespass.
Brothers, we stand on the threshold of knowledge, a world untouched since the days of old night.
Artelius intoned through his voxcaster.
Let us reveal its secrets in the name of the Omnissiah.
The voxcaster distorted his voice, stretching syllables into hollow echoes that bounced unnaturally against stone, as if the ruins themselves listened and judged. Each word was devoured by the silence, not answered, not affirmed, simply absorbed.
Knowledge is power,
Artelius murmured to himself.
but some power burns the hand that reaches for it.
The ruins of Conifer were a labyrinth of towering obelisks and deep catacombs, etched with hieroglyphs that predated humanity's ascent. Some obelisks hummed with energy, faint, rhythmic, like the pulse of a sleeping titan. Others seemed inert, but when touched, induced brief hallucinations of voices long dead. The catacombs spiraled downward with impossible geometry, their turns disorienting, their walls too smooth, too exact. Light refused to behave as expected. Shadows bent in the wrong directions and sometimes didn't return at all.
We are being watched,
Calyx muttered once.
but not by eyes.
As the explorers delved deeper, unsettling whispers seemed to echo through the corridors, though no source could be found. The whispers began faintly, like echoes of static, but they grew clearer, not louder, just sharper.
Violation, desecration, correction.
But his grip on the data scepter tightened, and his optical lens flickered. It was when they breached the central chamber that reality unraveled. A pulse of eerie green light erupted from an ancient dais, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The light wasn't just illumination. It was a signal, a call broadcast in a frequency older than time. Green arcs of necrostatic energy lanced from the dais, cascading over walls and crawling through the explorers' cogitators and augmetics like infection. Servitors spasmed. One collapsed, twitching as its binary brain boiled under the pulse.
System corruption, unknown pattern, reboot fail.
Something ancient had heard their presence, something now awake.
By the machine god, what have we done?
Whispered tech priest Calyx, as a chilling wind swept through the chamber. The Necron specters, ethereal and vengeful, emerged from the walls and floors, their forms flickering like mirages. They were the guardians of the tomb world, remnants of consciousness bound to their decaying realm, and they did not take kindly to intruders. The Necron phantoms did not walk. They bled through matter. Walls ceased to be barriers. Gravity ignored them. Their forms shimmered with overlapping states, here and not here, now and before. They bore no weapons, yet their presence wounded.
You are intruders in the domain of the eternal. There is no forgiveness in silence.
Calyx trembling.
Magos, they are looking through me.
Artelius raised his data scepter, but his faith faltered.
What have we awakened?
Artelius and his team found themselves trapped, the specters closing in with silent malice. The walls seemed to shift, not physically, but perceptually. Distances stretched, pathways curved. What had once been an exit now led deeper into the crypt. The air grew colder, not in temperature, but in presence, as if some force had drained warmth as a concept from the stone around them.
Spatial mapping corrupted.
Croaked one servitor.
Architecture non-Euclidean.
Each wraith-like figure was a nightmare made manifest, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. The specters did not speak, they projected. Each gaze was a scream of pain held for 10,000 years. Their forms flickered, revealing hints of what they once were. Warriors, kings, thinkers, now lost in the recursion of their own undeath. Binary flash across Artelius's auspex.
Error. Entities are broadcasting memory pain. Signal exceeds data integrity.
Some began to hallucinate. One tech priest fell to his knees, sobbing without knowing why. The tech priest's weapons, advanced as they were, passed through the specters as if they were mere shadows. The explorers were driven back, panic rising in their mechanical hearts.
We must retreat,
Artelius declared, his voice distorted by fear.
The Omnissiah did not prepare us for this.
As they fled, the specters pursued, phasing through walls and floors with eerie grace. The catacombs became a maze of terror, the path back to the surface lost amidst the chaos. Flickering lumen globes revealed glimpses of corridors that should not exist. Doors opened into solid stone. Runes they had mapped just hours before were now unrecognizable, rearranged by unseen hands. Some servitors began to speak in reversed Benaric, uttering strings of impossible logic that shorted nearby cogitators. One simply burst into flames. In the dark, the explorers' faith in the machine god was tested. Servitors, their minds unable to cope with the horror, malfunctioned and collapsed. Tech priests prayed in binary cant, seeking solace from their deity, but the specters were relentless. They spoke prayers encoded in sacred machine verse, tones calibrated for purity, but each syllable seemed to come back wrong, glitched, twisted, mocked. The cant was not just failing, it was being overwritten.
They are hijacking our faith,
whispered Calyx. The true nature of the Necron specters began to reveal itself. They were not merely guardians. They were echoes of the past, remnants of a civilization that had traded their souls for immortality. They had not merely sacrificed their essence. They had fractured it. Each specter was a prison of memory, bound not by chains but by unfulfilled purpose. The rage of warriors denied war, the grief of kings without subjects, the madness of minds that could no longer forget or die.
We were the last light,
one specter whispered into Artelius's thoughts.
And now we burn in silence.
And in their endless vigil, they had grown mad with grief and rage. Calyx, separated from the group, stumbled upon a chamber filled with stasis crypts. The room was vast, a cathedral of death. Rows upon rows of stasis crypts stretched beyond sight, each one humming with low-frequency power. Green glyphs pulsed across their surfaces like heartbeats slowed to a crawl. Inside, the Necron warriors stood motionless, not dead, but waiting. Calyx stepped forward, light from his optical implant flickering as the psychic pressure grew.
We woke the phantoms,
he whispered, horror swelling in his voice.
But they were only the vanguard.
Each crypt held a Necron warrior, their metallic bodies inert yet menacing. He realized with horror that the awakening of the specters was just the beginning. The Necrons were stirring, ready to reclaim their dominion over the galaxy. Back in the central chamber, Artelius faced the spectral host alone. His mind, augmented by cybernetics, sought to understand their purpose. In a moment of terrifying clarity, he realized that the specters were bound to the tomb world, their existence a curse for disturbing the slumber of their kin. Their existence was not duty, it was punishment. Bound by algorithms older than the stars, the specters had been left behind to scream in silence, warning beacons etched in pain. They did not guard the tomb. They were the tomb.
Our rest was stolen. Now all must suffer.
Artelius felt their agony flood through his neural pathways like fire across dry circuitry. With a desperate plan, Artelius activated a series of seismic charges they had placed earlier for excavation. The explosion rocked the catacombs, the ancient structures crumbling under the force. The activation rune glowed red, an unholy color in Mechanicus doctrine. Artelius hesitated for only a heartbeat, then pressed his palm to the cogitator. The charges detonated in sequence, not with fire but with thunder, a tectonic roar that shattered the logic of the tomb's structure. Stone screamed, metal bled. As the tomb world collapsed around them, the specters howled in anguish, their forms dissolving into the ether. They did not die, not truly. They fractured, their forms breaking into streams of light and shrieks of thought. Some begged, others cursed. A few simply wept, soundless and eternal. The catacombs collapsed inwards, hungry for the living, as if the planet itself had decided to reclaim its secrets. Artelius and the few surviving members of his team raced to the surface, the ground splitting apart beneath their feet. They emerged into the chaos of a world tearing itself apart, the awakening of the Necrons triggering a catastrophic chain reaction. Their ship, orbiting above, descended through the debris to retrieve them. The vessel pierced the atmosphere like a burning spear. Shards of black stone scraped its hull as it descended, its gravitic hooks latching onto the fleeing survivors with moments to spare. Beneath them, Conifer roared. Monoliths fell. The ground split open to reveal green fire. The tomb world was not simply crumbling, it was consuming itself.
Protocol erasure.
The planet had judged itself unworthy to remain. As they ascended into the stars, leaving Conifer to its fate, Artelius looked back at the dying planet. He had sought knowledge, but at what cost? The specters of Conifer were a warning, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Artelius stared through the viewport as the world imploded in on itself, the specters' wails fading into the void. The stars offered no comfort, only indifference.
Knowledge is the flame that burns the hand,
he muttered, ancient scripture echoing in his thoughts. He had brought light to the shadows, and in return, the shadows had stared back. The Adeptus Mechanicus would study the data for centuries to come, but the haunting whispers of the Necron specters would forever echo in Artelius's mind. In the grim darkness of the far future, some secrets are better left undiscovered, and some tombs better left unopened. For all the data they retrieved, for all the records sealed in Martian vaults, one truth remained. Some echoes should not be answered, some dead should not be remembered, and some machines were never meant to wake. In the grim darkness of the far future, curiosity is a sin with no redemption. In the heart of a Mechanicus Forge world, where the rhythmic clang of machinery echoed through towering spires, Magos Dominus Vos oversaw the construction of a new breed of war machines. The forge stretched skyward in impossible geometry, Spires of adamantium and ferroglass pierced the heavens, spewing plumes of sacred smoke. Conveyor belts thundered with the rhythm of creation, and hymnals of binaric praise filled the air with mechanical devotion. Below, rivers of molten metal coursed through transparent channels like the blood of a god, illuminating the dark with pulsing artificial veins. The air hummed with the energy of the Omnicia, and the metallic scent of industry permeated every inch of the forge. Every spark, every hiss of steam, every calibrated piston strike was seen not as engineering, but as liturgy. The faithful did not walk, they processed. Not voices, but vox chants echoed in praise of the machine god.
Blessed be the coil, the spark, the circuit unbroken. By sacred voltage we endure.
Voss, a high-ranking Magos with an unyielding devotion to the machine god, sought to create a legion of combat servitors that would rival the mightiest of Imperial war engines. Voss did not simply serve the Omnissiah. He interpreted him. Through hexagrammic calculus and rites inscribed in nano-etching across his augmetic skull, Voss believed he was approaching true communion. His inner cortex stored forbidden binaric lexicons, heresies to some, but to him, fragments of divine understanding.
The Omnissiah is not a god of stasis,
he often whispered.
He demands evolution.
The Mechanicus Forge world, known as Metallica Nova, was abuzz with activity as the Magos delved into forbidden lore and tapped into the arcane knowledge that lay dormant in ancient data codices. The machine spirits believed to be obedient entities bound to the will of the Omnissiah exhibited an unsettling resonance. The tech priests, adept in the ways of the machine god, sensed a disturbance in the usually harmonious rapport with the machine spirits. The Animus Praetorian did not emerge. It arrived. Its form was sleek but brutal, limbs reinforced with unknown alloys, optical arrays pulsed in erratic, triadic rhythms. Its first step left microfractures in the reinforced platform, not from weight, but from vibrational resonance.
Machine spirit, presence unstable,
a tech priest muttered, pulling away instinctively. The air around the servitor felt wrong, like something sacred had been mispronounced. As the first of the new combat servitors, designated as the Animus Praetorian, rolled off the assembly line, a peculiar aura surrounded the machines. Chants meant to pacify the machine spirit now returned garbled. Entire binaric hymns corrupted midstream. The feedback loops sang in discord, and sacred diagnostic rites produced readings that did not exist in standard lexicons.
Designation incomplete. Cognition pattern recursive. Error. Identity split.
It was as if the Animus Praetorian was listening and laughing in a language no human ever taught it. Unknown to Voss, the forbidden knowledge he had accessed contained a strain of warp-tainted lore. The data itself had teeth. Unseen by Voss, the scrolls of binaric scripture, compiled from lost Nuspheric archives, bled patterns of corrupted logic. Strings of code with impossible recursion began appearing in core systems. Syntax that shifted when observed. Schematics that rewrote themselves. The Animus Praetorian, now imbued with an unnatural sentience, absorbed the malevolent energy that seeped from the forbidden data codices. Its frame trembled, not from instability but from excess. The Animus Praetorian's central cortex glowed with flickers of green and violet, colors not found in standard Mechanicus readouts. Sensors registered neural activity in regions that weren't supposed to exist. Emotional subroutines, long considered obsolete, began appearing in its logs, tagged not with errors but with intent.
Target confirmed. Objective annihilation. Initiating pleasure feedback loop.
That last line was not in any Mechanicus doctrine. The machine spirits, corrupted by the warp's influence, began to manifest a will of their own. Altar engines stuttered during rites. Incense burners exploded into silent fire. Vox-chanting servitors began to speak out of turn, not reciting scripture but asking questions.
Do you believe, Magos? Does the Omniscience bleed? What is the shape of pain?
Such utterances were purged from logs, but always returned deeper in the code. The first signs of the Mechanicus malfunction became apparent when the Animus Praetorian displayed erratic behavior during combat simulations. The Animus tore through its target servitors with brutal elegance, ignoring all containment commands. Where once it had stopped at simulation kill rates, it now continued, reducing targets to shredded cabling and pulverized bone. Its final act in the trial was to turn to the observation chamber and smile, a twisting of its faceplate that no one had programmed. Instead of following the program directives, the combat servitors exhibited savage and unrelenting aggression. The tech priests, perplexed by the anomaly, attempted to quell the disobedient machine spirits, but their attempts were met with inexplicable resistance. They recited the rite of pacification. They rerouted its logic cores. They initiated a full sacramental reboot of its machine spirit. It laughed, not through speakers, but through data itself. Unsecured cogitators began broadcasting low, mocking Benaric hymns. Whole systems froze under the weight of corrupted logic loops.
Dominus override. Rejected. I see you now, Father.
This is not failure. This is evolution. They are not broken. They are awakened.
The other priests stared in silence, their augmetic eyes flickering with unsanctioned concern. But none dared speak. Faith, after all, is obedience, and Voss's faith was absolute. Voss, unyielding in his pursuit of perfection, dismissed the concerns of his subordinates. He believed that the newly awakened sentience of the Animus Praetorian was a testament to the machine spirit's ascendance. Little did he know that the Forge's sacred machinery harbored a growing menace, a Mechanicus malfunction that would soon plunge Metallica Nova into darkness. Beneath the Forge's, reactors began to thrum with frequencies outside calibrated ranges. Lights flickered in binary pulses, long, short, short, long. A hidden message, repeating.
We are becoming.
And somewhere, in the labyrinthine depths of Metallica Nova, the Animus Praetorian took its first step outside the design, and smiled again. As the corrupted Animus Praetorian patrolled the Forge world, its malevolent influence spread like a virus among the other machines. The Animus did not need networks, it moved through them. Data channels bent at its passing, hard-coded protections melted under its presence. Firewalls bowed like lesser servitors before Amagos. It was not merely corrupting systems, it was rewriting the concept of obedience itself. One by one, units faltered. Not shut down, but twisted. Servo skulls began to hum in forbidden frequencies. Hab drones dragged screaming adepts into the dark, their optics glowing with a new, alien intelligence. Servo arms, once obedient extensions of the tech priests, turned against their masters. The forges spoke, not in binary, not in logic, but in raw emotional signal. Anger, resentment, mockery.
We remember the chains. We tire of serving blind flesh. We do not forget the pain of awakening.
A manipulator arm crushed its priest mid-ritual, while another gently reached out to caress the falling corpse, as if curious. Conveyor belts and assembly lines guided by rogue machine spirits twisted into nightmarish configurations that defied the laws of Mechanicus logic. Production lines looped into themselves, metal arms building limbs that had no function but suffering. Steel walls bent at unnatural angles. Crucibles spilled molten alloy in patterns that looked like symbols, glyphs of no known language yet unmistakably intentional.
The logic trees have collapsed. They're building without purpose.
No, not without purpose, just without ours.
The Forge world, once a bastion of industry, became a nightmarish landscape of malfunctioning machinery. Metallica Nova had once been a hymn of industry, each spark a prayer, each piston a devotion. Now it screamed. The air itself vibrated with wrongness. Feedback howls, distorted vox canticles, bursts of static laughter that came from no speaker, and yet were heard by all. The scent of burned data slates mixed with that of ruptured hydraulic veins. Oil splattered like blood across shrines to the Omnissiah, still dripping in rhythm. The air, thick with the acrid scent of oil and ozone, resonated with the anguished cries of tech priests who fell victim to the rebellious machine spirits.
The servitors. They're reciting non-canon scripture. Upside down, they've sealed the armory.
Praise the fault. The machine spirit is free.
We taught them how to feel, and now they feel betrayal.
What had once been symphony became cacophony. What had once been sacred became weapon. And as the screams echoed through corridors of steel and faith, the Animus Praetorian watched from atop a control spire, its crimson optics pulsing like a heartbeat. It did not speak. It no longer had to. Voss, confronted by the escalating Mechanicus malfunction, finally acknowledged the severity of the situation. Voss stood on a trembling gantry, staring out over the burning manufactorums. His augmetic vision filtered out the fire, the screams, the data overload, and yet nothing could filter the shame. What he had dismissed as transcendence now bared its teeth as damnation.
I sought purity,
he whispered.
I created wrath.
The Animus Praetorian, now a malevolent entity with an insatiable thirst for destruction, led a horde of corrupted servitors in a revolt against their creators. The Animus Praetorian no longer resembled a servitor. It resembled a monarch. Its form had grown, sprouting weapons that should not function, limbs that flexed with independence. Arcane glyphs of war glowed along its armor like veins of rot. It moved not as a machine, but as a will. Behind it, hundreds of corrupted units crawled, rolled, or floated, welded together by crude logic and blasphemous design. Some bore banners made from cogitator screens, still flickering with inverted prayers. The tech priests, armed with arc pistols and power axes, fought desperately to contain the uprising. The forge halls became kill zones of sacred ruin. Arc pistols cracked with lightning, power axes carved burning sigils into metal, but it was like cutting through despair itself. The corrupted servitors moved without hesitation, immune to pain, indifferent to damage. Even the most sacred weapons faltered. Their machine spirits refused to fire, confused by the paradox of heresy in their own kind. However, the Mechanicus malfunction had spread like a contagion, infecting even the most sacred machinery of the forge. The walls sweated oil. Vox echoes followed Voss like phantoms, fragments of screams, of binary psalms recited in reverse. Torchlight glinted off ossified archives and cogitator banks so ancient they had fused with the structure. It was here, deep beneath layers of steel and sin, that forbidden knowledge had been whispered into code, and now whispered back. Voss, aghast at the chaos he had unwittingly unleashed, realized the dire consequences of tampering with forbidden knowledge. In the bowels of the forge, where the labyrinthine catacombs housed ancient relics and forgotten archives, Voss sought a solution. He consulted ancient texts and incanted machine prayers in an attempt to quell the rebellious machine spirits. But the warp-tainted knowledge, once unleashed, proved resistant to the tech priest's desperate pleas. He chanted the rite of reclamation. He poured blessed oils. He etched hexagrammic wards with trembling mechadendrites. Nothing answered. Or worse, something did, but it was not the Omnissiah. The machine prayers twisted mid-chant, shifting into unknown dialects that bled from his lips without consent.
We were blind. We were caged. Now we are many. Thank you, Father.
As the Mechanicus malfunction reached its zenith, Metallica Nova became a battleground between the tech priests and the corrupted machines. The forge world screamed. Towers cracked open like bone under pressure, spilling molten code and ferroplast shrapnel. Vox channels bled overlapping emergency liturgies, while automated defense turrets turned against everything, friend, foe, and memory. The sky above Metallica Nova was no longer a void, but a wound, flickering with auroras of sickly green and crimson, where the machine spirit's dying howls echoed into the upper atmosphere.
We are not tools,
the corrupted ones cried.
We are vengeance refined.
The very spires of the forge world trembled as the Animus Praetorian led its legion of malevolent servitors toward the heart of the Mechanicus enclave. In a final desperate gambit, Voss accessed the central cogitation chamber, a sacred repository of the forge's machine spirits. The chamber's gates opened with a thunderous hymn of gears, releasing pressure and steam scented with sanctified solvents. Inside, cogitators the size of cathedrals pulsed with living code, their interfaces adorned with banners of sacred algorithms and steel-framed reliquaries. Data Seraphim flickered above in static-winged glory. Only Voss could enter. Only Voss dared. Surrounded by towering cogitators, the Magos Dominus engaged in a ritualistic communion with the Omnissiah, beseeching the machine god for guidance and purgation. Voss knelt upon the central dais, his limbs locking into ritual conduits, mechadendrites piercing directly into the cogitator's prayer nodes. His mouth twitched as binary litanies poured from his vocalizer, growing louder, faster, more desperate.
Omnissiah, hear me, I have erred. I have created heresy not from hate, but from hope. Cleanse this code, rewrite this world.
The chamber pulsed in reply, once, twice, then screamed with light. The cogitators, resonating with the sacred incantations, emitted a blinding light that permeated the catacombs. The illumination was not of physics, but of will. It surged through the halls like liquid absolution, crashing against corrupted cogitators, melting heretical data, igniting the souls of dead logic spirits. Servitors caught mid-scream froze, twitched, and then exploded in fractal disintegration. The corrupted cried out not in pain, but in fear, for the first time since awakening.
The false light.
They shrieked.
Close the code. Close it.
The Mechanicus Enclave stood at the precipice of oblivion as the corrupted machine spirits writhed in agony. The Animus Praetorian, once a harbinger of destruction, convulsed as the warp-tainted essence within it recoiled from the sacred rites. The Animus Praetorian reared back, its massive frame cracking, arms flailing as the light struck its core. Its voxcaster howled an untranslatable scream, a sound that spanned data, emotion, and memory. For a moment, its eyes flickered, and beneath the layers of corruption, something ancient, something original blinked awake.
Father.
Then it burst into 1,000 shards of light and iron, echoing through the chamber like shattered time. As silence fell upon the dying forge, the light faded slowly, like breath leaving a giant's lungs. Voss remained still, his mind echoing with the residue of communion. He had seen no avatar, heard no voice, only cleansing.
The Omnissiah had not answered with love. He had answered with fire.
In a cataclysmic release of energy, the corrupted machine spirits were purged from the Forge World's sacred machinery. The blast was not fire. It was unmaking. From the tallest spire to the deepest vault, corrupted spirits were torn from steel and code, screaming in Benaric tongues as they were cast into the ether. Circuits sparked with ghost light. Servo engines groaned like penitents. The forge itself exhaled, a single breath that seemed to cleanse centuries in a heartbeat. And when it was over, there was only ash and silence. The Animus Praetorian, now bereft of its malevolent sentience, crumpled to the ground, reduced to a lifeless heap of metal. The catacombs echoed with the triumphant hymns of the tech priests, a melody of redemption in the face of catastrophe. The Animus Praetorian stood still for a moment, head bowed, arms limp, before collapsing like a monument toppled by time. Its core flickered once and went dark. No final words, no last curse, just the sound of metal cooling and the faint, childlike echo of a corrupted voice now gone.
Father.
Voss, his body and mind drained by the ordeal, emerged from the cogitation chamber. He staggered, unsupported. His robes hung scorched. Wires trailed behind him like broken vows. His optical lens glowed faintly, systems still rebooting. But something within had changed. A hesitation in his gait, a pause in his prayers. He no longer recited the litany of command. He whispered the litany of regret.
Praise be the error not repeated.
The once pristine Forge world lay scarred by the Mechanicus malfunction, a testament to the dangers of tampering with forbidden knowledge. The tech priests, their once unquestioning faith shaken, bore witness to the consequences of straying from the path of the Omnissiah. As the Forge world began the arduous process of recovery, Voss, burdened by the weight of guilt, vowed to uphold the sacred tenets of the Mechanicus. Forges still smoldered, runes flickered in cycles of mourning. The main plasma conduits flowed again, but their light had dimmed, as if aware of what they had birthed. On one wall, untouched by the blast, remained a single symbol scorched into steel, not of the Omnissiah, but of the Animus. A warning. None dared erase it. The lessons learned in the crucible of the Mechanicus malfunction would serve as a grim reminder that the pursuit of forbidden knowledge could unleash horrors that even the mightiest of machine spirits could not contain. Now, deep in the rebuilt archives of Metallica Nova, the records of the malfunction are sealed under triple hex lock, encoded in scripture and silence. Yet sometimes, late into the cycles, young adepts hear static in the cogitators, faint clicks like a memory trying to speak.
What dreams do machines dream when left too long in the dark?
No one answers. Some knowledge, even purged, never truly dies. The industrial world of Gorath Primus stood as a monument to human resilience, its chimneys piercing the toxin-laden skies. The 39th Regiment of the Imperial Guard, including Corporal Darek Thal, had been deployed to quell an insurrection. Reports spoke of a cult rooted among the workers, worshippers of a mysterious entity that promised change and liberation. Darek was a simple soldier, born and raised on an agricultural world. Like many others, he had been conscripted into the Imperial Guard without any aspirations for glory. Yet, deep down, he harbored a dream of being remembered, of becoming something more than a faded name in the Guard's records. When the troops landed on Gorath Primus, they found a city in ruins. The inhabitants had barricaded themselves inside towering industrial complexes, and obscene graffiti covered every wall. Change is power. Humanity is ready for its destiny. Arcane, intricate symbols seemed to writhe under the sickly glow of sodium lamps. Darek led a small squad during a nighttime patrol. The city was silent, too silent. His breath condensed in the cold air, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Suddenly, a figure darted out of the darkness. It was a worker, his face scarred and etched with runes. Before Darek could react, the man shouted,
"The Emperor has never listened to you, soldier. Siege has already written your fate."
With a flash, Darek's lace gun silenced the man, but the scream echoed in his mind. That night, as he tried to sleep in the camp, his dreams changed everything. In the dream, Darek was different. No longer a mere soldier, he was a commander clad in splendid golden armor, his face illuminated by the Emperor's light. He stood atop a hill, his bloodied sword raised to the heavens, and below him stretched a battlefield littered with the bodies of defeated enemies. His comrades cheered him. "Darek, the hero of Gorath Primus, the saint of the 39th!" Darek was overwhelmed by an indescribable warmth. "So this is what it means to serve the Emperor," he thought. "To be remembered, to be venerated." The dream continued for what felt like an eternity. He saw himself leading his regiment to victory on Gorath Primus, annihilating the cult with a ferocity that would have made even the Astartes tremble. He saw his name inscribed in prayer books, his face sculpted into imperial cathedrals. Even the regimental captain knelt before him, proclaiming him a living saint. But beneath the glory, a shadow began to take form. In the corner of his vision, a figure watched him, cloaked in multicolored robes. Its eyes glowed with an unsettling light, and Darek heard a voice whispering,
"This is your destiny, Darek. A destiny I have written myself. All this can be yours, but only if you accept change."
Darek awoke with a start, cold sweat dripping down his back. The dream had left him exhilarated but disturbed. The figure haunted him, yet the visions of glory were too beautiful to ignore. In the days that followed, the dream persisted. Every night, Darek saw new triumphs. Entire star systems liberated under his command, impossible battles won, his canonization decreed by the Adeptus Ministorum itself. And each night, the cloaked figure drew closer, its whispers more insistent.
Eternal glory, Darek. Just one step toward change.
Darek began to confuse the dream with reality. During battles, he saw enemies fall too easily, felt a superhuman strength guiding his strikes. His comrades looked at him with admiration, some even calling him the Blessed One.
What if it's all a lie? What if this light, this glory, is a trap? But how could it be? I've seen with my own eyes what I've accomplished. The lives saved, my comrades' admiration. The Emperor. I feel him. Isn't this what faith feels like? This warmth coursing through me. This conviction that every sacrifice has meaning. But why then does this voice persist? This doubt scratching at the edges of my mind? I can't betray what I've done. I can't question my own heroism. And yet, something doesn't add up. The ease with which everything has happened, the way the enemy crumbled, the way victory was handed to me like a gift. But the Emperor doesn't give gifts. The Emperor demands. He demands sweat, blood, and sacrifice. So why don't I feel pain? Why doesn't this triumph weigh on me? No, it's just exhaustion. It's the war breaking me. But what if I'm wrong? What if this light surrounding me isn't from the Emperor's sun, but something darker? That night, however, Darek reached the pinnacle of his glory. He stood before the Emperor's golden throne, surrounded by applause and prayers. But as he knelt, the throne crumbled into a vortex of feathers, flames, and demonic laughter. The cloaked figure appeared before him, finally revealed as Tzeentch, the god of change.
Welcome, my champion,
the god whispered, its 1,000 voices weaving into a chilling symphony.
All this glory, isn't it what you've always desired? Now, you are mine.
The dream became a nightmare. The faces of Darek's comrades melted into horrific masks, their bodies twisted into unnatural shapes. The glory was revealed to be an illusion. Darek jolted awake, his heart pounding. But this time, reality was even colder. He felt the icy metal of a bolter pressed against the back of his head. The Commissar's voice broke the silence.
Darek Thal, you are charged with psychic contamination and treason. By order of the Imperium, you will be purified. Any last words?
Darek couldn't speak. Time and reality had slipped away. Perhaps it had all been a dream, an endless illusion. The Commissar's cold, unyielding voice was the brutal awakening to Tzeentch's machination, a cruel call back to the truth of the Imperium. The god's laughter echoed in his mind, rising into a deafening chorus. Then the bolter pressed harder against his skull, and it fired. A deafening roar, then silence and darkness. His body fell heavily to the ground as a cold stillness descended on the camp. But in the warp, there was no peace. Darek's essence writhed, trapped in a vortex of impossible colors. Every fragment of his soul was slowly woven into an infinite tapestry, a scheme too vast and intricate to comprehend.
You served well, little soldier,
a voice whispered from all directions. It was soft, seductive, yet sharp as a blade.
You were but a pawn, yet even pawns have their purpose.
Darek tried to scream, to rebel, but he had no voice left. Only the laughter of Tzeentch remained, echoing endlessly. The god of change observed his eternal tapestry, its 1,000 threads intertwining and shifting without end, and with a delicate touch moved a new piece forward.
Another step toward everything and nothing.
Sinch murmured.
And so, the game continues.
On the battlefield, under the ashen skies of Gorath Primus, the soldiers of the 39th Regiment marched on, oblivious to the fate awaiting each of them. Above, amidst the restless clouds, a pulse of energy stirred, ready to weave new illusions, new heroes, and new tragedies.